The moment Sophie Bennett whispered those 5 words in ancient Arabic, she signed her own death warrant. A $200 million deal, a forged treaty, a room full of billionaires who'd kill to keep their secrets buried, and one terrified waitress who just couldn't stay silent. What happens next will leave you speechless. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale travels across the world. This is the story of how the most invisible woman in Manhattan became the only person a ruthless billionaire could trust. The snow came down in thick, wet clumps that night, the kind that turned Manhattan into something that looked almost clean for about 15 minutes before the slush and exhaust turned everything gray again. Sophie Bennett pressed herself against the brick wall outside the Velvet Room's service entrance, trying to light a cigarette with shaking hands. The wind kept killing her lighter. "Fuck," she muttered, giving up and shoving both the cigarette and lighter back into her apron pocket. Her fingers were numb. She'd been outside for maybe 2 minutes and already couldn't feel her nose. Inside, she could hear the muffled sounds of wealth, laughter that cost more than her monthly rent, the clink of crystal that probably cost more than her entire life. Sophie hated this place. Not the restaurant itself. The Velvet Room was actually beautiful in that intimidating way that very expensive things always are. All dark wood and brass fixtures and lighting so carefully designed, it made everyone look like they'd just stepped out of a magazine. No, she hated what the place represented. She hated the people who came here. She hated the way they looked through her like she was furniture. Most of all, she hated that she needed this job so desperately she'd smile and nod and take whatever scraps of dignity they left her. "Sophie, get your ass back inside!" Marco's voice cut through the cold. The kitchen manager, a sweaty man who smelled perpetually of garlic and resentment, glared at her from the doorway. "Private room just sat. Your section." "Coming?" She pushed off the wall, brushing snow from her shoulders. "And fix your face. You look like someone died." Someone did die, she thought, but didn't say. 4 years, 3 months, and 16 days ago. Sophie pushed through the service entrance, letting the heat hit her like a wall. The kitchen was chaos as always, orders being shouted, pans clanging, someone swearing in Spanish about undercooked fish. She moved through it automatically, tying her apron tighter, checking her reflection in the metal surface of the walk-in cooler. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled back so tight it gave her a headache. The kind of face that disappeared the moment you stopped looking at it. Perfect. The hallway to the private dining rooms was quieter, insulated from the kitchen noise by thick doors and money. Sophie's shoes made no sound on the plush carpet. She'd learned to walk quietly here, invisible, forgettable. Room 7, the Cypress Suite. She paused outside the door, pressing her ear against it. Male voices, at least 6 of them. The low rumble of serious conversation, not the drunk laughter of a bachelor party or the forced joviality of a business dinner that was really just an excuse to expense a $5,000 meal. This was something else. Sophie knocked twice, soft and professional, then pushed the door open. The room went silent. 8 men sat around the long table, and the combined weight of their attention nearly made her step back. These weren't the usual hedge fund managers or tech bros who threw money around to prove they had it. These were older, quieter. Dangerous in the way that real power is always dangerous. At the head of the table sat a man who looked wrong for the room. He was younger than the others, maybe early 30s, dressed in a plain dark coat over a simple sweater. No watch that cost more than a car. No rings or cufflinks screaming wealth. His face was tired in a way that expensive facials couldn't fix, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. But the others deferred to him. She could see it in how they angled their bodies, waited for him to speak first. "Good evening, gentlemen." Sophie's voice came out steady despite the knot in her stomach. "My name is Sophie, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start anyone with a drink?" One of the older men, heavy-set with jowls and the kind of tan that came from winters in the Caribbean, waved a dismissive hand. "Macallan 25. Neat, for everyone." He didn't look at her when he spoke. "Of course, sir. I'll be right back with—" "No!" The younger man's voice cut across hers. Not loud, but absolute. "I'll have water, still, no ice." The heavy-set man's face twitched with annoyance. "Ethan, for Christ's sake, we're celebrating—" "Water." Ethan, that was his name, apparently, finally looked at Sophie. His eyes were gray, she noticed. Storm gray. The kind of gray that made you think of winter oceans. Please. Of course, sir. She wrote it down even though she didn't need to. Anything else? Privacy, one of the other men said. This one was younger, maybe mid-40s, with the kind of polished good looks that screamed expensive dentistry and personal trainers. His suit probably cost more than Sophie made in 6 months. We have business to discuss. Sophie nodded and backed out of the room, pulling the door closed behind her. In the hallway, she let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Heavy hitters? Marco had materialized beside her, wiping his hands on his stained apron. I don't know. Maybe. Sophie headed toward the bar. They want Macallan 25, 7 of them, and water for the 8th. Marco whistled low. That's a $300 pour times 7, plus whatever they eat. You play this right, your tip could be a month's rent. If they tip at all, Sophie thought. In her experience, the richer they were, the worse they tipped. Like the act of acknowledging her as a person who needed money was beneath them. She returned with the drinks on a silver tray, her face carefully neutral. Knocked twice. Entered. The conversation died again. Sophie distributed the whiskeys first, moving clockwise around the table. The men didn't acknowledge her except to shift slightly when she reached past them. She saved Ethan for last, setting the water glass down on his right side. Thank you, he said quietly. She almost stumbled. In 4 years of working here, maybe a dozen people had actually thanked her. You're welcome, sir. Are you ready to order, or do you need more time? The heavy-set man, she was mentally calling him Jowls, pulled out a thin laptop. We'll order later. Right now we need complete privacy. No interruptions. Understood? Of course, sir. I'll be right outside if you need anything. She was almost to the door when she heard it. The sound of paper sliding across polished wood. The rustle of something old, delicate. Sophie glanced back, just a glimpse. On the table, under the warm light, lay a document that made her blood freeze. Yellowed parchment. Wax seals, red and gold. Arabic script in formal calligraphy. The kind used in legal documents centuries ago. And in the corner, barely visible from where she stood, a symbol she'd seen before. The crest of the Al Rashid Oil Consortium. Her hand tightened on the door handle. Keep walking, she told herself. This is none of your business. You're a waitress. You serve drinks and smile and cash your paycheck. That's it. She pulled the door closed behind her and leaned against the wall, her heart hammering. The Al Rashid Consortium had been dissolved in 1987 after a series of corruption scandals. She knew this because her father had worked on the legal team that handled the dissolution. She'd been 6 years old, sitting in his Dubai office, playing with colored pencils while he worked late into the night on those exact documents. He'd taught her to read Arabic that year. Not modern Arabic, but the classical formal version used in legal and religious texts. It's important, Habibi, he'd told her, his reading glasses sliding down his nose as he showed her the difference between everyday words and legal terminology. Language is history. If you can read the old contracts, you can understand how power really works. Sophie pressed her palms against the cool wall, trying to calm down. It was probably nothing, probably just a replica, or a historical document they were discussing for some legitimate reason. Rich people collected weird shit. Maybe one of them was a history buff. Except she'd seen the way they'd gone silent when she entered, the way that polished man had demanded privacy, the tension in the room thick enough to choke on, and she'd seen the date on the document just for a second. 1983, 4 years before the dissolution. Right in the middle of when the consortium was negotiating drilling rights across 3 countries, rights that would eventually be ruled illegal and fraudulent. Walk away, Sophie told herself. Go check on your other tables. Do your job. Stay invisible. She pushed off the wall and headed back toward the main dining room. 30 minutes passed. Sophie served appetizers to a table of lawyers celebrating a won case, refilled water glasses, smiled at a regular who never remembered her name despite coming in twice a week for 3 years. The door to the Cypress suite remained closed. 45 minutes. Sophie was clearing table 12 when Marco appeared at her elbow. Your private room rang. They want you. Her stomach dropped. Okay. And Sophie? Marco's voice dropped. Whatever they're doing in there, you didn't see it. You don't know them. You're invisible. Clear? Crystal. She approached the Cypress suite like approaching a crime scene, knocked twice, waited for permission. "Come in." The room had changed. The document, that old yellowed parchment, now sat directly in front of Ethan, who stared at it with an expression Sophie couldn't read. Around the table, the other men looked pleased with themselves, satisfied. Giles smiled at her, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "We're ready to order now. And another round of drinks? Make it fast." Sophie wrote down their orders. 32-ounce steaks, lobster, sides that cost more than her grocery budget for a month. Her hand moved automatically while her eyes kept drifting to that document. Something was wrong with it. She couldn't put her finger on what, exactly. The calligraphy was beautiful. The seals looked legitimate, but something in the formal phrasing of the Arabic text that she could see from her angle. "That's all," the polished man said, not looking at her. "Go." Sophie nodded and turned to leave. That's when she saw it. The phrase at the top of the document, written in classical Arabic legal terminology, "Bi-ismi al-Sultan al-A'la wa al-Majlis al-Nafti al-Rashidi," in the name of the Supreme Sultan and the Rashidi Oil Council. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. The title Supreme Sultan wasn't used in UAE legal documents after 1971, Habibi. After the formation of the Federation, all contracts used Sheikh or Emir. Anyone using Sultan after that date was either ignorant or forging something. Sophie's hand froze on the door handle. The document was dated 1983, 12 years after the title became obsolete in Emirati legal terminology. "No," she thought. "No, no, no. You're wrong. You're remembering wrong. It's been years since you studied this stuff. You're a waitress now, not a legal translator. You don't know what you're talking about." But her father's office was so clear in her mind. The smell of old paper and Arabic coffee. His patient voice as he taught her the difference between classical and modern legal Arabic, showing her how forgers always made the same mistakes with archaic titles. Sophie stepped into the hallway and closed the door. Her hands were shaking. She made it halfway to the kitchen before she had to stop, pressing her back against the wall, trying to breathe. If that document was fake, and every instinct in her body was screaming that it was, then someone in that room was about to lose a lot of money. Or someone was about to steal a lot of money. Either way, not her problem. Except she'd seen Ethan's face. That tired, sad face that made him look less like a billionaire and more like a man barely holding himself together. She'd seen the way he looked at that document, not with greed or cunning, with resignation, like signing it was just another weight to carry. And she'd seen the way the other men looked at him, like sharks circling something wounded. "Stay out of it," the smart part of her brain said. "You're nobody. You're nothing. You speak up, you lose your job, probably get blacklisted from every decent restaurant in the city, end up working double shifts at a diner in Queens just to make rent." But there was another voice, quieter, her father's voice. "Sometimes, Habibi, the truth is more important than being safe." He'd believed that, right up until it got him killed. Sophie straightened up, smoothed her apron, headed to the bar to put in their drink order. She had maybe 15 minutes before she had to bring their food. 15 minutes to decide if she was going to stay invisible and safe, or if she was going to do something catastrophically stupid. The bartender, Luis, who'd worked here since before Sophie was born, slid the whiskeys across the bar top. "You okay? You look pale." "I'm fine." "You sure? Because you look like you're about to either throw up or punch someone." Sophie forced a smile. "Just tired." "Uh-huh." Luis didn't look convinced, but he knew better than to push. "Well, don't die on me. I got $50 on you making it through the whole shift without crying in the walk-in." "Who bet against me?" "Marco." Despite everything, Sophie laughed. Of course he did. She carried the drinks back to the Cypress suite on autopilot, her mind spinning. The document would be signed tonight. She could see it in how the men had positioned themselves, in the expensive pens laid out on the table, in the bottle of Dom Perignon someone had ordered for after. Once Ethan signed, the deal would be done. Money would change hands. By the time anyone realized the document was forged, if they ever did, the men in this room would be long gone, and Ethan would be the one holding the bag. Sophie knocked on his door, entered, distributed the drinks with steady hands. "Food will be out in approximately 12 minutes, she said, her voice professionally neutral. "Excellent." Jowls raised his glass. Gentlemen, I believe we're about ready to finalize this historic arrangement. Historic. Right. Sophie turned to leave. Do it now or never do it. Stay invisible or burn your whole life down for a stranger. Her father's compass had been found in the wreckage of his car. The police said he'd lost control on a mountain road outside Dubai. Accident. Bad luck. These things happen. Sophie had been 26. She'd buried him alone. No one from his firm came to the funeral. The corruption charges, false, fabricated, but permanent, had made sure of that. She'd spent the last 4 years invisible, safe, quiet, and absolutely fucking terrified every single day that she'd betrayed everything her father taught her about the truth. Sophie stopped at the door, turned around. 8 pairs of eyes swung toward her. Her mouth was dry. Her heart was trying to punch through her ribs. Sir? She looked directly at Ethan, switching from English to a Gulf Arabic dialect so specific, so archaic, that maybe 3 people in this entire city would understand it. The document before you contains legal terminology that did not exist in the year of its supposed creation. The title structures are incorrect. The wax seal is from the wrong period. You are being deceived. The room exploded. What the fuck did she just say? The polished man was on his feet, his face flushed. Did she just... Get her out of here! Jowls slammed his hand on the table. Marco, get your fucking waitress under control! But Ethan hadn't moved. He stared at Sophie with those storm-gray eyes, and she watched understanding dawn across his face. Say that again, he said quietly, in perfect Arabic, the same dialect she'd used. Slowly. Sophie's entire body was shaking now, but she held his gaze. In Arabic, she said, "The document uses Supreme Sultan as a title in 1983. That title was obsolete in Emirati legal contracts 12 years before this document's date. The calligraphy is beautiful, but the scribe used a Levantine style that would never appear in a Gulf state legal document. And the seal. The wax has been artificially aged, but the color is wrong. Al-Rashid Consortium seals were always burgundy, never this shade of red." Silence. Then Ethan stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Everyone stay exactly where you are," he said, his voice soft but carrying an edge that made Sophie's spine straighten. He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my authentication team." "Ethan, this is ridiculous." The polished man, she could see his name tag now, Damian Sterling, tried to smile, but it came out wrong, desperate. "You're going to trust some waitress over the documentation we've spent 6 months preparing?" "Preparing." Ethan repeated the word like it tasted bad. "Interesting choice of words, Damian." "Vetting. I meant vetting. Jesus Christ, you know what I meant." But Sophie could see it now. The way Damian's hand trembled as he reached for his whiskey. The way Jowls wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. The way the other men around the table were suddenly very interested in their phones, their drinks, anything but the conversation happening. "Sophie." Ethan said her name like he'd known it forever. "How do you know this?" This was it. The point where she either committed fully or backed down. "My father was Ahmad Bennett. He worked for the legal firm that dissolved the Al-Rashid Consortium in 1987. He taught me classical Arabic legal terminology when I was a child. Her voice cracked slightly. "He died 4 years ago, accused of corruption. Falsely." Something shifted in Ethan's expression. Not pity. Sophie had learned to recognize pity from a mile away. This was something else. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone who understood what it meant to lose everything to a lie. The door burst open. Marco stood there, red-faced and sweating. "Sophie, what the hell?" "Marco." Ethan didn't raise his voice, but Marco stopped mid-sentence like he'd hit a wall. "Your employee just saved me from losing $200 million. I suggest you give her a raise." Marco's mouth opened and closed silently. Ethan's phone buzzed. He answered it, speaking in rapid-fire English. "I need the full authentication team on a video call in 3 minutes." "Yes, now. I don't care what time it is in London. Conference room 7, private line. And get me Harold from Princeton, the document specialist." He ended the call and looked at Damian. "We're going to go through this document line by line. If Sophie is right, and I'm fairly certain she is, then you and I are going to have a very different conversation than the one we planned." Damien's polished facade was crumbling. This is insane. You're going to blow up a $200 million deal because some waitress, because someone who actually knows what they're looking at pointed out that I was about to sign my name to a forgery. Ethan's voice went cold. The question isn't whether I trust her. The question is why I should still trust you. The room felt like it was vibrating with tension. Sophie stood frozen by the door, every instinct screaming at her to run. But Ethan looked at her again, and this time there was something like gratitude in his expression. Stay, he said simply. I'm going to need you to walk my team through everything you just told me. I'm just a waitress. No. Ethan shook his head slightly. You're not. The next 2 hours were a blur. Ethan's authentication team appeared on a large video screen that someone, Sophie wasn't sure who, set up in the private room. Historians, legal experts, a document specialist from Princeton who looked like he'd been woken from a deep sleep and was still somehow thrilled to be examining a potentially forged treaty. Sophie explained everything she'd seen. The title discrepancies, the seal color, the calligraphy style, the formal phrasing that was just slightly wrong, the kind of wrong that only someone who'd spent years studying the difference between regional Arabic legal dialects would catch. The experts confirmed every single point. The document was a masterwork forgery, probably worth $50,000 just for the craftsmanship, but absolutely, completely, devastatingly fake. The real question, Harold from Princeton said, peering at the screen with fascination, is who made it? This level of work requires serious expertise, classical Arabic calligraphy training, access to period-appropriate materials, knowledge of historical legal conventions, and motivation. Ethan's voice was quiet. He looked at Damien, who sat white-faced and silent, who had 200 million reasons to create a convincing fake. Damien's lawyer, who'd appeared somewhere around hour 1, tried to speak. My client has no knowledge of any forgery. We were given this document by whom? Ethan leaned forward. Because I'm very interested in your supply chain right now, Damien. The other men around the table had gone quiet. Some had already left, making excuses about early flights and family emergencies. The ones who remained looked like they were mentally calculating their legal exposure. Sophie stood in the corner, forgotten again. Or so she thought. Ms. Bennett, Harold's voice came from the speakers. Your father was Ahmad Bennett, the translator who worked on the '87 dissolution? Yes, sir. I knew him, briefly. Brilliant man. His work on the historical oil rights documentation was... Harold paused. Well, I was very sorry to hear about his passing. Thank you. The corruption charges were always suspect. I said so at the time, for whatever that's worth. It was worth more than Harold probably knew. Sophie felt something loosen in her chest, just slightly. At 11:47 p.m., federal agents arrived. Sophie watched from her corner as they read Damien his rights, watched the polished, handsome man who'd demanded privacy turn into something smaller, more desperate, as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. You're fucking insane, Damien spat at Ethan as they led him toward the door. You think you're untouchable? You think this is over? Ethan didn't respond. He just watched, his expression unreadable. Then Damien looked at Sophie, really looked at her, for the first time all night. I know you, he said slowly. Ahmad Bennett's daughter, the little translator. I remember you now. Sophie's blood went cold. Your father should have kept his mouth shut too. Damien smiled, and it was the ugliest thing Sophie had ever seen. Look how well that worked out for him. The agents pulled him through the door before Sophie could respond, before she could process what he'd just said. The room emptied slowly after that. The remaining investors slipped away with their lawyers. Marco appeared briefly, looking shell-shocked, to tell Sophie to take the rest of the night off. The authentication team signed off one by one, promising full written reports by morning. Finally, it was just Sophie and Ethan in the ruins of what should have been a celebratory dinner. Did you know? Sophie asked. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. About my father? No. Ethan was still staring at the door Damien had been led through. But I'm going to find out. He said my father should have kept his mouth shut. I heard. That means Sophie couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't make herself say what her brain was screaming. Ethan looked at her, finally. It means your father's death might not have been an accident, and it means Damien Sterling just became my absolute priority. Sophie sat down heavily in one of the expensive chairs. Her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. I need you to tell me everything, Ethan said quietly. Everything about your father, his work, the corruption charges, how he died, all of it. Why? Because I don't believe in coincidences. Ethan pulled out his phone again. And I don't believe a world-class forger just happened to target a deal I was involved in right when someone who could identify the forgery just happened to be serving our table. You think this was... Sophie couldn't even process what he was suggesting. I don't know what I think yet, but I'm going to find out. He made a call, speaking quickly. I need a full background workup. Ahmad Bennett died 4 years ago in Dubai, and I need protection detail for his daughter. Yes, now. I don't care. Make it happen. He ended the call and looked at Sophie. Do you have somewhere safe to go tonight? My apartment? Not anymore. Someone will take you to a secure location. Pack a bag, enough for a few days. I don't understand what's happening. Neither do I. Not yet. Ethan stood up, and for the first time that night, Sophie saw past the exhaustion to something harder underneath. Something that explained why 7 powerful men had deferred to him. But I'm very good at figuring things out, and I take care of people who take care of me. I just pointed out a mistake. No. Ethan shook his head. You risked everything to tell a complete stranger the truth. In my world, Miss Bennett, that's rarer than you'd think. A man appeared in the doorway, tall, professional, with the kind of alert awareness that screamed security. Sir, car's ready. Thank you, James. Ethan looked at Sophie. He'll take you somewhere safe. I'll contact you tomorrow when we know more. Sophie stood on shaky legs. My job, is waiting for you when this is over. I'll handle Marco. Ethan's expression softened slightly. I promise. You're not going to lose anything for helping me. Famous last words, Sophie thought, but she nodded anyway. She followed James through the empty restaurant. It was after midnight now, the place closed and dark. Through the kitchen where the night crew was cleaning down, out into the cold where a black car waited, expensive and anonymous. As she climbed into the back seat, Sophie looked back at the velvet room one last time. Through the window, she could see Ethan still standing in the private dining room, his phone to his ear, looking every inch the billionaire he supposedly was. And Sophie realized she'd just stepped off a cliff. No idea if there was ground below or just more falling. The car pulled away from the curb, and Manhattan slid past the tinted windows like a dream she was forgetting. In her pocket, her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start finding answers. Sophie leaned her head against the cool window and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 4 years. Her father had died believing the truth mattered more than safety. Tonight, Sophie had finally understood what he meant, and she had no idea if that understanding was going to save her or destroy her. The safe house wasn't what Sophie expected. She'd imagined something out of a spy movie, concrete bunker, armed guards, maybe a panic room. Instead, James drove her to a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights with flower boxes in the windows and a cat sleeping on the front stoop. This is it? Sophie asked as the car idled at the curb. Top floor. Code is 4789. Don't open the door for anyone except me or Mr. Calloway. James handed her a phone, new, still in the box. This is secure. Your old phone stays off, completely off, not just airplane mode. Sophie took the phone, her fingers clumsy. For how long? Until we know what we're dealing with. James's expression softened slightly. There's food in the fridge. Clothes in the closet that should fit. Try to sleep. Try to sleep. Right. Sophie climbed out of the car and watched it disappear down the quiet street. The neighborhood was the kind of expensive quiet that Manhattan had mostly lost. Tree-lined, tasteful, the sort of place where people walked designer dogs and complained about property taxes. She felt completely out of place. The apartment was on the 4th floor, accessed by stairs that creaked under her weight. Sophie punched in the code and stepped into a space that looked like it had been staged for a magazine shoot. Hardwood floors, exposed brick, windows overlooking the East River, and absolutely no personal touches. No photos, no books, no evidence anyone actually lived here. It was a beautiful cage. Sophie dropped her bag, hastily packed with whatever she could grab from her shitty studio in 20 minutes, and sank onto the couch. The leather was butter soft and probably cost more than her car. Her old phone was still in her pocket. James had told her to turn it off, but Sophie couldn't quite make herself do it. It felt like cutting the last thread connecting her to her real life. She pulled it out, staring at the cracked screen. 3 missed calls from Marco, probably wondering if she was coming back or if he needed to find coverage for her shifts. A text from her landlord about next month's rent. A reminder that her student loans were due in 5 days. Normal problems. Regular problems. Problems that felt like they belonged to someone else now. Sophie powered the phone down and set it on the coffee table like something dangerous. The new phone buzzed in her hand, making her jump. A text from the only contact saved in it, Ethan Calloway. Settled in? Sophie stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "Yes, this place is nicer than anywhere I've ever lived." The response came quickly. "Good. Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow." Then, a moment later, "Thank you. For tonight. I mean it. Sophie set the phone down and pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. She was not going to cry. She'd survived the last 4 years without falling apart, and she wasn't going to start now just because a billionaire she'd met 6 hours ago was being unexpectedly human. She made it to the bedroom before the tears came anyway. Morning arrived too bright and too early. Sophie woke disoriented, tangled in sheets that smelled like expensive detergent, sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize. For a few seconds, she couldn't remember where she was or why. Then it all crashed back. The document. Damian Sterling's face as they arrested him. His words. "Your father should have kept his mouth shut too." Sophie grabbed her new phone. 6:47 a.m. No messages. She showered in a bathroom that had better water pressure than her entire apartment building, then raided the closet James had mentioned. Someone had stocked it with clothes in her size, jeans, sweaters, even underwear still in the package. It should have felt thoughtful. Instead, it felt invasive, like someone had measured her without her knowing. Sophie dressed in jeans and a gray sweater that was softer than anything she owned, then investigated the kitchen. The fridge was stocked like someone had gone down a grocery list written by a nutritionist. Fresh fruit, Greek yogurt, eggs. Vegetables she couldn't name. A loaf of bread from some bakery that probably had a 6-month waiting list. She made coffee in a machine that looked like it required a PhD to operate, then stood at the window watching Brooklyn wake up. Her phone rang at 8:15. Sophie Bennett. She answered automatically, the way she used to when her father would call from the office. "Good morning." Ethan's voice sounded less exhausted than last night. "Did you sleep?" "Some. You?" "Not much." The sound of papers shuffling. "I've been reading about your father." Sophie's grip tightened on the phone. And I'm sorry for what happened to him, for what they did to his reputation." "You didn't know him." "No. But I've read the charges they filed, and I've read his defense. The whole thing was..." Ethan paused. "Convenient. Too convenient. Your father discovered irregularities in a major oil contract, reported them to his superiors, and 3 weeks later he's accused of taking bribes from the same company he was investigating." Sophie sat down heavily on the couch. "The police said there was evidence, bank transfers, offshore accounts in his name. Fabricated evidence is still evidence." Ethan's voice went hard. "I've seen this play before. Someone gets too close to something they shouldn't see, and suddenly they're the criminal. Happens more often than you'd think." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need to know if you want the truth, or if you want to leave this alone." Sophie's laugh came out bitter. "What kind of question is that?" "A fair one. The truth is expensive, Sophie. It costs money, time, energy. Sometimes it costs more than that." A pause. "I'm offering to find out what really happened to your father. But if we go down that road, we're committed, no halfway. Either we get answers or we burn everything trying. I need to know if you're ready for that." Sophie thought about the last 4 years, working doubles at restaurants where men like Damian Sterling looked through her like furniture, smiling until her face hurt, staying quiet, staying invisible, staying safe. "I'm ready," she said. "Okay. James will pick you up in an hour. We've got a meeting." "With who?" "Someone who might have answers about Damian Sterling's operation." Ethan's tone shifted slightly. "Fair warning, this person is difficult. but they're the best at what they do, which is following money that doesn't want to be found. The line went dead. Exactly 1 hour later, James appeared at the door. He drove her into Manhattan, taking turns that seemed deliberately confusing, doubling back twice. Looking for tails, Sophie realized, making sure no one followed them. They ended up at a building in Tribeca that looked abandoned from the outside. Graffiti on the metal shutters, newspapers piled against the door. But when James entered a code and pulled the door open, the interior was anything but abandoned. Exposed ductwork, polished concrete floors, glass-walled offices where people worked at computers with multiple monitors. It looked like a tech startup designed by someone who'd watched too many hacker movies. This way. James led her through the maze to a conference room in the back. Ethan stood at the window, phone to his ear, speaking rapid-fire Mandarin. He looked different in daylight, still tired, but sharper somehow, more in his element. He wore dark slacks and a black sweater, no tie. His hair was slightly messy, like he'd been running his hands through it. He ended the call when Sophie entered. "You found it okay. James is very efficient. That's why I pay him." Ethan gestured to the table where a woman sat with a laptop and approximately 6 different phones scattered around her. "Sophie Bennett, meet Maya Chen. Maya is a forensic accountant," Maya interrupted, not looking up from her screen. She was maybe 40, with short cropped hair dyed silver and glasses with thick black frames. Also a data analyst, skip tracer, an occasional miracle worker. "Nice to meet you. You're the waitress who nuked a $200 million deal." "I didn't mean to nuke anything." "Sure you did." Maya finally looked up, and her eyes were sharp behind the glasses. "Nobody speaks up like that unless they mean to blow something up. Own it." Sophie glanced at Ethan, who almost smiled. "Maya doesn't really do social niceties. Social niceties are a waste of processing power." Maya turned the laptop around, showing a screen full of financial data that meant nothing to Sophie. "Here's what I found so far on Damien Sterling. Multiple shell companies in the Caymans, a network of offshore accounts, transaction patterns that suggest money laundering, but nothing concrete enough to prosecute. Yet." "Yet?" Sophie moved closer to look at the screen. "Well, give me 3 days and I'll have enough to put him away for 20 years. Maybe 30, if we get lucky." Maya's fingers flew across the keyboard. "But here's what's interesting. 6 weeks ago, Sterling moved $5 million through a cutout company to a law firm in Dubai." Sophie's stomach dropped. "Which firm?" Maya read off a name that made the room tilt. The same firm that had filed the corruption charges against Sophie's father. "That's..." Sophie couldn't finish the sentence. "Not a coincidence," Ethan said quietly. "We know." Maya pulled up another screen. "The payment was listed as legal consultation fees, but the amount is way too high for legitimate work. This was a payoff." "For what?" Sophie asked, even though she was starting to understand. "That's what we need to find out." Ethan leaned against the table, his arms crossed. "Maya, can you trace the other end? See who at the firm received the money?" "Already did. Senior partner named Hassan Mansour. Real piece of work, apparently. Specializes in making problems disappear." Sophie remembered that name, too. He'd been the lead attorney on the case against her father. She'd only met him once, at the reading of the verdict. He'd looked at her with something like pity and said, "Your father made choices. Now he pays for them." "Sophie?" Ethan's voice cut through the memory. "You still with us?" "Yeah, sorry." She shook her head, trying to focus. "What does this mean?" "It means Sterling paid off your father's accusers." Maya said it like she was commenting on the weather, which suggests the whole corruption case was manufactured, which, in turn, suggests your father discovered something about Sterling's operation that needed to be buried. "But my father worked in Dubai. Sterling operates mostly in New York and London. How would they even have crossed paths?" "That's the question." Ethan pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. "Maya, pull up Sterling's business history from 2018 through 2022. Focus on Middle East operations." Maya's fingers danced across the keys. "Okay, here we go. 2018, Sterling Capital Partners opened an office in Dubai. 2019, they started brokering deals for oil rights across the UAE and Saudi Arabia. 2020, oh, that's interesting." "What?" Sophie and Ethan asked simultaneously. 2020, Sterling attempted to purchase historical drilling rights from the dissolved Al Rashid Consortium. The deal fell through when documentation couldn't be verified. Maya looked up. Want to bet on who was handling the verification? Ahmad Bennett, Sophie whispered. Bingo. Maya turned the laptop toward them. Your father's name is all over the legal files. He flagged irregularities in the title transfers, said the provenance was questionable, recommended against the sale. And 3 weeks later, he's accused of corruption. Ethan's jaw tightened. They didn't kill him immediately. They discredited him first, made sure nobody would believe anything he said about their operation. Sophie felt sick. The car accident was 4 months after the charges were filed. The room went quiet. Maya broke the silence. I can pull the accident report, see if there's anything that doesn't add up. Do it. Ethan looked at Sophie. If this is too much, shh. It's not. Sophie's voice came out harder than she intended. Keep going. Maya pulled up another screen, this one showing a police report in Arabic. She scrolled through it quickly, her eyes scanning. Okay, so official cause was driver error. Your father allegedly lost control on a mountain road during a rainstorm. Car went over the barrier, rolled 3 times before catching fire. Allegedly? Sophie caught the word. No witnesses. No traffic cameras on that stretch of road. The investigation was closed in 48 hours. Maya's expression was neutral, but her tone wasn't. For a case involving a man under active investigation for corruption? That's fast. Too fast. What about the car, Ethan asked. Was there a mechanical inspection? Report says yes, but it's vague. No mechanical failure detected. That's it. No details about what they actually checked. Can we find the inspector? Ask what he actually looked at? Maya typed rapidly. Inspector's name was Khalid Aziz. Died 6 months after your father. Heart attack, apparently. Sophie closed her eyes. Of course he did. Hey. Ethan's voice was closer. When she opened her eyes, he was standing next to her. We're going to figure this out. How? Everyone involved is dead or paid off or too scared to talk. Not everyone. Ethan looked at Maya. Sterling's been running this operation for at least 4 years. That's a lot of moving parts. A lot of people on the payroll. Someone knows something. I'll start pulling his employee records. See who worked for him in Dubai during the relevant period. Maya was already typing. Give me a few hours. We don't have a few hours. Ethan checked his watch. Sterling's arraignment is this afternoon. Once he makes bail, and he will make bail, he's going to start cleaning house. Any witnesses, any evidence, anything that could connect him to Ahmad Bennett's death, it'll disappear. So what do we do? Sophie asked. Ethan was quiet for a moment, that calculating look on his face. We move faster than he does. Maya, I need everything you can find on Sterling's operation in the next 2 hours. Financial records, employee names, property holdings, everything. If he owns a parking space in Dubai, I want to know about it. On it. Sophie and I are going to the arraignment. I want to see his face when he realizes we're not backing down. Is that smart? Maya looked skeptical. He already knows Sophie can identify the forgery. Putting her in the same room with him seems like asking for trouble. That's exactly why we're doing it. Ethan's smile was cold. I want him to know he can't intimidate us, and I want to see who shows up to support him. Lawyers, associates, friends. Everyone who appears in that courtroom is part of the network. You're using Sophie as bait. I'm using us both as bait. Ethan looked at Sophie. Unless you'd rather sit this out, I'd understand. Sophie thought about her father's funeral, how empty it had been, how his former colleagues had stayed away, unwilling to be associated with a disgraced man, how she'd stood alone in the rain while they lowered his casket into the ground. I'm coming, she said. The arraignment was held in a federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan, all marble columns and security checkpoints. Ethan had somehow procured visitor passes that let them skip the metal detectors and public galleries, leading Sophie through a side entrance to a private viewing area. Friends in high places? She asked. I donate to a lot of judicial education programs. Ethan's tone was dry. It buys goodwill. The courtroom was smaller than Sophie expected. Wood paneling, uncomfortable benches, fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly corpse-like. Damian Sterling sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, flanked by 3 lawyers who looked like they billed $1,000 an hour. He looked calm, confident. That changed when he saw Ethan and Sophie enter. For just a second, his mask slipped. Sophie saw fear flash across his face before he got it under control. "He knows," she whispered. "Good." Ethan settled into his seat, completely relaxed. "Let him be scared." The judge entered, a severe-looking woman in her 60s who seemed annoyed to be there. The prosecutor laid out the charges: fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, forgery. The list went on. Sterling's lead attorney argued for bail, citing his client's ties to the community, his charitable work, his complete lack of flight risk. "Your Honor, Mr. Sterling has cooperated fully with authorities. He's a respected businessman with no prior criminal record. Bail is more than appropriate in this case." The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, the defendant has access to significant financial resources and documented connections to at least 7 countries without extradition treaties. He's absolutely a flight risk. My client has surrendered his passport. He has 3 passports that we know of, possibly more." The judge looked bored. "Bail is set at $20 million, cash or bond. Defendant will surrender all travel documents and submit to GPS monitoring. Next case." The gavel came down. Sterling's lawyers were already moving, making calls, arranging the bail payment. He'd be out by evening. "That's it?" Sophie felt something twist in her chest. 20 million and he just walks? For now. Ethan was watching the defense table carefully. "But look who's here." Sophie followed his gaze. A man had appeared next to Sterling's lawyers. Middle Eastern, maybe 60, wearing a perfectly tailored suit and an expression like he owned the building. He spoke briefly with the lead attorney, then glanced toward where Sophie and Ethan sat. When his eyes met Sophie's, recognition flickered across his face. "Who is that?" Sophie asked. "Hassan Mansour." Ethan's voice was very quiet. "The lawyer from Dubai. The one who prosecuted your father." Sophie's blood went cold. Mansour said something else to Sterling's team, then left through a side door, moving quickly. "James!" Ethan was already on his phone. "Mansour just left the courtroom, heading toward the east exit. Don't lose him." They left before the next case was called, Ethan moving with purpose through the courthouse corridors. Outside, James was waiting by the car, looking frustrated. "Lost him in the subway. He knew he was being followed." "Doesn't matter." Ethan pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. "Maya, Hassan Mansour is in New York. I need to know where he's staying, who he's meeting with, everything." Maya's response came through on speaker. "Already on it. His phone pinged a tower near the courthouse 10 minutes ago. Now he's moving north. Looks like he's heading toward... Wait, that's interesting." "What?" "He's heading toward Sterling's office building in Midtown." Ethan and Sophie exchanged looks. "They're meeting," Sophie said, "right now while Sterling's still in custody." "Why?" "Damage control." Ethan climbed into the car, pulling Sophie in after him. "James, take us to Sterling Capital Partners. Stay a block away." The drive took 20 minutes through midday traffic. Ethan spent the time on his phone, making calls in 3 different languages, his expression growing darker with each conversation. Finally, he looked at Sophie. "Sterling's bail just posted. He'll be released within the hour." "How did they get 20 million that fast?" "Mansour wired it from a bank account in Dubai." Ethan's smile was grim. "Which means Sterling and Mansour are more connected than we thought. And whatever they're planning, they needed Sterling out of custody immediately." The car stopped a block from a glass tower in Midtown. Sterling Capital Partners occupied floors 30 through 35, according to the directory visible through the lobby windows. "Now what?" Sophie asked. "Now we wait." Ethan settled back in his seat. "And we watch who goes in and out of that building." They didn't have to wait long. Within 30 minutes, Sophie counted at least a dozen men in expensive suits entering the building and heading to the upper floors. Some she recognized from the night before. Investors who'd been in the Cypress suite when the deal fell apart. "They're having a meeting," she said, "more like a war council." Ethan was taking photos with his phone, capturing each face. Maya's running facial recognition on all of them. By tonight, we'll know exactly who's in Sterling's network. Sophie's phone buzzed, a text from Maya. "You need to see this. Coming to the car." 2 minutes later, Maya slid into the front seat, turning to face them with her laptop open. So I've been digging into Mansour's finances. The guy's dirty as hell. Shell companies, offshore accounts, the whole playbook. But here's what's wild. She turned the screen toward them. Mansour has been making regular payments to someone in New York for the past 4 years. Same amount, every month. $50,000. To who? Ethan leaned forward. That's where it gets complicated. The payments go to a holding company which funnels them through 2 more companies before they hit a personal account. But I traced it. Maya's expression was serious. The final recipient is a NYPD detective named Marcus Webb. He works in the traffic investigation unit. Sophie felt the world tilt. Traffic investigation? Yeah. Maya met her eyes. The unit that would have handled your father's accident report if it had happened in New York, but also the unit that has connections with international traffic safety bureaus, including the one in Dubai. He helped them cover it up, Sophie whispered. The accident, he helped make it look legitimate. Or did more than that. Ethan's voice was ice. Maya, can you prove Webb was in Dubai 4 years ago? More typing. Give me a sec. Okay, yeah. Webb took 2 weeks of vacation time in September 2022. Flew to Dubai September 8th, returned September 23rd. My father died September 14th, Sophie said. The car was silent. We need to confront him, Sophie said finally. Webb, we need to make him talk. We need to be smart about this. Ethan was thinking, she could see it in how his eyes moved. If we go to Webb directly, he'll lawyer up or run. We need leverage first. I can get leverage. Maya's fingers were already moving across her keyboard. Give me until tonight. I'll have enough dirt on Detective Webb to bury him. Do it. Ethan looked at Sophie. And we need to warn your father's other colleagues, anyone from that legal team in Dubai. If Sterling and Mansour are cleaning house, they're in danger. I don't know most of them. My father kept his work separate from home. I'll find them. Maya made a note. Employment records from the firm. We'll track them down and make sure they're protected. Or at least warned, Ethan added grimly. Sophie's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs, trying to stop the tremor. This is real. They really killed him. It wasn't an accident. No. Ethan's voice was gentle. It wasn't. And they've just been walking around, living their lives, getting richer while my father's buried in the ground and I'm working double shifts just to eat. Sophie, I want them destroyed. She looked at Ethan, and she knew her expression was probably scary. She didn't care. Not arrested, not prosecuted, destroyed. I want to take everything from them the way they took everything from me. Ethan studied her for a long moment. Okay. Okay, we'll destroy them. He said it like he was agreeing to pick up coffee. But we do it right. Legally, carefully, completely. So when they fall, they stay down. Maya closed her laptop. I like her. She's got priorities. Despite everything, Sophie almost laughed. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Maya, this time with an attachment. Photo from Sterling's office building. Look at the timestamp. Sophie opened the image. It showed Hassan Mansour leaving the building with 2 other men. The timestamp read 15 minutes ago. But what made Sophie's breath catch was the third person in the photo. Detective Marcus Webb, in civilian clothes, walking out with Mansour like they were old friends. They're all here, she said, in New York, right now. Ethan took the phone, his expression hardening. Then we move tonight. Maya, how fast can you build a case against Webb? If I cut corners? 4 hours. Cut them. I want everything. Financial records, travel history, communications with Mansour, anything that connects him to Ahmad Bennett's death. On it. James, take us back to Tribeca. We've got work to do. Ethan looked at Sophie. Last chance to back out. Once we start this, they're going to come at us with everything they have. Sophie thought about her father teaching her Arabic in his office, the way he'd smile when she got a translation right, how he'd believe the truth mattered more than anything. I'm not backing out, she said. Then let's go to war. The war room in Tribeca looked like organized chaos by 7 that evening. Maya had commandeered 3 additional monitors, spreading financial data across them like a general plotting an invasion. James stood near the door, occasionally updating Ethan on movements outside Sterling's office building. And Sophie sat at the conference table, surrounded by documents that detailed the last 4 years of her father's life, or rather, the careful dismantling of it. Okay, here's what we've got. Maya spun her chair around, pushing her glasses up. Detective Marcus Webb has received exactly $2,400,000 from Hassan Mansour over the past 4 years, 50 grand a month, like clockwork. The payment started 1 week after Ahmad Bennett's death. Hush money, Sophie said. Her voice sounded flat even to her own ears, more like payment for services rendered. Maya pulled up another screen. Webb's travel records show he was in Dubai for 11 days in September 2022. He stayed at the Burj Al Arab. That's a $1,500 a night hotel, which is weird for a cop making 70 grand a year. Who paid for it? Ethan asked. A company called Maritime Consulting Services, registered in the Caymans, owned by another shell company, which is ultimately controlled by... Maya clicked through several screens. Hassan Mansour, same pattern as the monthly payments. Sophie stared at the hotel receipt on the screen. September 9th through September 20th, 2022. Her father had died on the 14th. Webb had been in the country for 5 days before it happened. That's not a coincidence, she said. No. Ethan was pacing now, his phone in his hand. Maya, what about the accident report? Can you access the original file from Dubai police? Already did. Want to know what's interesting? The report was filed by local police, but it was reviewed and closed by someone in the Traffic Safety Bureau, someone who reports directly to... More typing. Well, shit. Reports directly to a supervisor who received a $200,000 consulting fee from Maritime Consulting Services 2 weeks after the case closed. They bought the whole department. Sophie felt numb. How many people were involved in covering this up? At least 5 that I can confirm. Probably more. Maya turned to face them. This wasn't some sloppy hit job. This was coordinated, professional. Someone planned this for weeks. Ethan stopped pacing. Pull Webb's phone records. I want to know everyone he talked to in the week before Ahmad's death. On it. Maya's fingers flew across the keyboard. This might take a few minutes. His records are protected, but protected doesn't mean inaccessible. While Maya worked, Ethan moved to stand next to Sophie. He didn't say anything, just stood there like a silent promise that she wasn't alone in this. How do you do this? Sophie asked quietly. This kind of work. Finding out people are monsters and just functioning. Badly, mostly. Ethan's smile was tired. I don't sleep much. I drink too much coffee. My daughter barely sees me, even though we live in the same apartment. You have a daughter? Emma, she's 7. He pulled out his phone, showing Sophie a photo of a little girl with dark hair and gray eyes that matched his. She was laughing in the picture, covered in what looked like paint. She's staying with my sister this week. Safer that way. She's beautiful. She's everything. Ethan put the phone away. My wife died when Emma was 2, car accident. Except it actually was an accident. I had every investigator I could find look into it. Sometimes terrible things just happen. Sophie didn't know what to say to that. Got it. Maya spun her chair around triumphantly. Webb's phone records from September 2022. He made 17 calls to a Dubai number in the week before Ahmad's death. Guess who the number belongs to? Mansour, Sophie and Ethan said together. Bingo. And here's the fun part. On September 13th, the day before Ahmad died, Webb made 3 calls to a local number in Dubai. That number belongs to a car service company. The pieces were clicking together in Sophie's head, forming a picture she didn't want to see. They hired someone to tamper with his car. That's my guess, let's say. Maya pulled up more data. The car service company was paid $12,000 on September 13th. Payment came from Surprise Maritime Consulting Services. Ethan's jaw tightened. Do we have the name of the mechanic who worked on Ahmad's car? Company's been out of business for 3 years. Owner died in 2023, another convenient heart attack. But I found employment records. There were only 2 mechanics working there at the time. Maya brought up 2 photos. Rashid Khalil and Omar Hassan. Rashid died 6 months after the car service closed. Omar is still alive, working at a different garage in Dubai. We need to talk to Omar. Ethan was already pulling out his phone. About that, Maya's expression turned serious. Omar Hassan filed for asylum in the United States 7 months ago. He's currently living in Queens under a protected witness visa. Sophie's head snapped up. He's here? In New York? Afraid so. And according to his asylum application, he's got information about a murder that took place in Dubai in 2022. Maya met Sophie's eyes. Your father's murder. The room went silent except for the hum of computers. He knew, Sophie whispered. All this time, he knew what they did. And he's been hiding ever since. Ethan was already dialing. James, I need an address. Omar Hassan, Queens. Yes, now. James's response was immediate. Within 2 minutes, they had an address in Astoria. We're going to see him, Sophie said. It wasn't a question. Damn right we are. Ethan grabbed his coat. Maya, keep digging. I want to know everything about Webb's current location and movements. If he's meeting with Sterling or Mansour, I need to know immediately. What are you going to do? Get Omar Hassan to tell us exactly what happened to Ahmad Bennett. Then we're going to bury everyone involved. The drive to Astoria took 40 minutes through evening traffic. Sophie watched the city slide past the window, her mind racing. A mechanic named Omar Hassan had the answers she'd been looking for 4 years. He'd been in New York for 7 months, and she'd had no idea. You're quiet, Ethan said. I'm trying not to scream. Fair enough. The building where Omar lived was a rundown walk-up near the subway tracks. Paint peeling, windows covered with bars, the kind of place where people minded their own business because asking questions was dangerous. James stayed with the car while Ethan and Sophie climbed 3 flights of stairs that smelled like curry and cigarette smoke. Apartment 3C. Sophie could hear a television through the door, voices speaking Arabic. Ethan knocked. The television went silent immediately. Omar Hassan? Ethan called out. My name is Ethan Calloway. I'm here about Ahmad Bennett. Silence. Then, in accented English, Go away. I don't know this name. Sophie stepped forward, speaking in Arabic. My name is Sophie Bennett. Ahmad was my father. Please. I just want to know what happened to him. More silence. Then the sound of multiple locks being undone. The door opened a crack, revealing a thin man in his 50s with a haunted expression and shaking hands. Omar looked at Sophie like he was seeing a ghost. You look like him, he said in Arabic. Your father, same eyes. Can we come in? Sophie asked gently. Omar hesitated, then opened the door wider. The apartment was tiny, one room serving as bedroom, living room, and kitchen. Everything was neat but worn, the life of someone who owned nothing and wanted to be forgotten. I knew someone would come eventually. Omar sat down heavily on the bed, the only furniture besides a small table and 2 plastic chairs. I have been waiting for 4 years. Tell us what happened, Ethan said. He remained standing, but his posture was less aggressive than Sophie expected, almost gentle. Omar's hands wouldn't stop shaking. I need to know, are you here to kill me? No. Sophie sat down on one of the plastic chairs. I'm here for the truth, that's all. Omar studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Your father was a good man. I want you to know that first. What I did, what they made me do, it haunts me every day. What did they make you do? Sophie's voice was steady, but her hands gripped the edge of the chair so hard her knuckles went white. They paid me $50,000 to cut the brake lines on your father's car. Omar said it quickly, like ripping off a bandage. They told me he was a criminal. They said he was stealing money, and they needed to stop him before he hurt more people. I believed them because I am stupid, and $50,000 is more money than I would make in 5 years. Sophie couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The room was spinning. Who paid you? Ethan's voice cut through the fog. A man from America. Detective, he said. He showed me a badge. Said he was working with Dubai police to catch your father. Omar looked at Sophie with tears in his eyes. I swear to you, I thought I was helping. I thought your father was a bad man. Marcus Webb, Sophie said. The American was Marcus Webb. Yes, that was his name. Omar wiped his face. He came to the garage with another man, older, from Dubai, a lawyer. They had papers showing your father was being investigated. They said he was going to run, that they needed to stop him before he could escape. Hassan Mansour. Ethan was recording everything on his phone. The lawyer was Hassan Mansour. I don't remember his name, but yes, a lawyer. Very expensive suit. He did most of the talking. Omar stood up, pacing the tiny space. They told me exactly what to do. Cut the lines so they would fail on a mountain road. Make it look like the car failed because of the rain and the driver error. They even told me which road he would be driving on, what time he would be there. How did they know his route? Sophie asked. I don't know, but they knew everything. His schedule, where he was going, what time he left work, like they had been watching him for weeks. Sophie thought about her father's last days. He'd been stressed, working late. She'd assumed it was just the case he was working on. Now she wondered if he'd known someone was following him. If he'd been afraid and hadn't told her because he didn't want her to worry. What happened after? Ethan asked. I did what they asked. Cut the brake lines that afternoon. Your father picked up his car at 5 o'clock. I watched him drive away and I felt sick, but I told myself it was justice. Omar's voice broke. He died that night. The news said it was an accident, but I knew I killed him. They killed him, Sophie said quietly. You were a tool. They're the murderers. I was a coward. I could have said no. I could have warned him. Omar sat back down, his head in his hands. Instead, I took their money, and I killed a good man. Is that why you came to America? Ethan asked. Because you felt guilty? I came to America because they tried to kill me too. Omar looked up, his face pale. 6 months after your father died, Rashid, my coworker, he had a heart attack. He was 32 years old and healthy. Then the garage owner died. Then the police inspector who closed the case. I realized they were cleaning up, getting rid of everyone who knew the truth. So you ran. I went to the American embassy and I told them everything. I said I had information about an American police officer committing murder in Dubai. They put me on a plane and gave me a new life. Omar gestured to the tiny apartment. This life. Hiding. Always afraid. Sophie stood up, moving to the window. Below, the street was dark and mostly empty. She wondered if Sterling or Mansour or Webb knew Omar was here. If they were watching right now, waiting for the right moment. Will you testify? Ethan asked. Against Webb, Mansour, Sterling, all of them. Will you tell a court what you just told us? Omar was quiet for a long time. If I testify, they will kill me. If you don't testify, they'll kill you anyway. Ethan's voice was matter-of-fact. You're a loose end, Omar. The only reason you're still alive is because they haven't found you yet, but they will, eventually. Then what choice do I have? You testify, and I protect you. I have resources they don't. Security, lawyers, safe houses in countries they can't reach. You help us put them away, and I make sure you actually get to live the rest of your life. Omar looked at Sophie. What do you want me to do? Sophie turned from the window. I want you to tell the truth. I want you to say in court exactly what you did and who made you do it. I want my father's name cleared, and I want the people who killed him to pay for it. Okay. Omar nodded slowly. Okay, I will testify. Ethan was already on his phone. James, we need extraction. 3 people going to the Tribeca office. Have Maya arrange federal protection for a witness. He paused. And James? We might have company. Stay alert. They left the apartment 10 minutes later, Omar carrying everything he owned in a single backpack. The stairs felt longer going down, every shadow a potential threat. Sophie's heart hammered against her ribs. They were halfway to the car when Sophie heard it, the sound of footsteps behind them, moving fast. Run! James's voice cut through the night. Get to the car, now! Sophie ran, Ethan's hand on her back propelling her forward. Behind them, she heard shouting, the screech of tires, James yelling something she couldn't make out. They reached the car and James shoved them inside, Omar tumbling in after. The engine roared to life before the doors were even closed. Go, 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 Ethan shouted. James floored it, the car fishtailing as it peeled away from the curb. Sophie looked back and saw 2 men standing where they'd just been, both reaching inside their jackets. Get down, James barked. Sophie ducked just as the rear window exploded in a shower of glass. Omar screamed. Ethan was on his phone shouting coordinates to someone. They're shooting at us. Sophie couldn't believe she was saying those words. This wasn't real. This was a movie. This wasn't her life. James took a hard right, Then another, weaving through traffic like he'd done this 1,000 times before. Maybe he had. Behind them, Sophie could see headlights following, gaining. Hold on! James cut across 3 lanes of traffic, ignoring the horns and screeching brakes, and plunged into a tunnel. The world went dark, except for the tunnel lights strobing past. The pursuing car was still behind them, closer now. Then James did something Sophie would never have expected. He slammed on the brakes. The car behind them swerved, trying to avoid the collision. It clipped their bumper and spun out, crashing into the tunnel wall with a sound like the world ending. James didn't stop. He accelerated through the tunnel and out the other side, taking turns at random until Sophie lost all sense of direction. Finally, 15 minutes, and what felt like 100 turns later, James pulled into an underground parking garage. Everyone okay? His voice was calm, like they'd just finished a pleasant Sunday drive. Define okay, Omar said. His face was gray. Sophie checked herself. No blood, no injuries, just terror and adrenaline making her hand shake so badly she couldn't unfasten her seatbelt. Ethan helped her with the buckle, his own hand surprisingly steady. You did good. You stayed calm. I think I'm going to throw up. That's also fine. They switched to a different car in the garage. Apparently, James kept several vehicles stashed around the city and made it to Tribeca without further incident. Maya was waiting at the door, her expression grim. I heard. Federal agents are already looking for the shooters, but I'm guessing they're gone. They knew we were going to see Omar. Ethan's voice was ice. Which means they're either watching him or they're watching us. Or both. Maya led them inside. I've got the whole building on lockdown. No one gets in without facial recognition and 3 forms of ID. Omar looked around the high-tech office like he'd stepped onto another planet. Where am I? Somewhere safe. Sophie touched his arm gently. I promise. Maya set Omar up in a secure room with food and a phone that only called pre-approved numbers. Federal marshals arrived an hour later to take his statement and arrange official protection. Through it all, Sophie sat in the conference room, staring at the documents spread across the table. Her father's death certificate, the accident report, the corruption charges, 4 years of lies, all laid out in black and white. Sophie, Ethan's voice pulled her back. We need to talk about next steps. Next steps. She laughed, and it sounded slightly hysterical even to her. Someone just shot at us. What next steps are there besides running? We don't run. Ethan sat down across from her. We have Omar's testimony. We have Maya's financial evidence. We have proof that Webb, Mansour, and Sterling conspired to murder your father and cover it up. Now we take it to the FBI. The FBI? Sophie rubbed her face. You really think they'll care? A 4-year-old murder in Dubai, a corrupt cop on their payroll, a lawyer from overseas. They'll bury it. Not if we don't give them a choice. Ethan pulled out his phone, showing her a contact labeled FBI, Sarah Chen. I know someone. Someone who actually gives a damn about justice. She'll listen. And if she doesn't, then we go to the press. The Times, the Journal, every major outlet. We make so much noise they can't ignore it. Ethan leaned forward. You asked me earlier how I do this work. The answer is I don't let them win, ever, no matter what it costs. Sophie looked at him, really looked at him. The exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the careful control he maintained over everything because if he let go for even a second, the weight of what he carried would crush him. You're not doing this just for me, she said quietly. Are you? Ethan was quiet for a moment. My wife's accident, the one I said I investigated. I found proof it really was just bad luck. She was driving in a storm, took a turn too fast, hit black ice. But before I knew that, I spent 6 months thinking maybe it wasn't an accident. Maybe someone had a reason to hurt her because of my business dealings. The not knowing almost destroyed me. But it was an accident. It was. But I met a lot of people during those 6 months who weren't so lucky. People whose loved ones really were murdered and made to look like accidents. People the system failed because they didn't have money or connections or the ability to fight back. Ethan met her eyes. So yeah, I'm doing this for you, but I'm also doing it for everyone who doesn't have a billionaire willing to go to war for them. Sophie didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to process that this man she'd met barely 24 hours ago was risking everything for a principle. Thank you, she said finally. Don't thank me yet. We haven't won. Maya appeared in the doorway. Hate to interrupt, but we've got a problem. Sterling just posted a statement on his company website. She pulled up the statement on the main screen. Sophie read it, her stomach sinking with each word. Damian Sterling categorically denied all charges. He called the forgery accusation a misunderstanding. He announced his company was pursuing legal action against everyone involved in what he termed a coordinated attack on his reputation and business. And at the bottom, a quote that made Sophie's blood run cold. I have faith that the truth will prevail, and those who have made false accusations against me, including certain individuals with documented family connections to corruption investigations, will be held accountable. He's threatening you. Ethan's voice was hard. Publicly. He's saying my father really was corrupt, that I'm making this up because... Sophie couldn't finish. Because you're vindictive. Because you're trying to clear your father's name by destroying innocent people. Maya's expression was disgusted. It's a classic PR move. Flip the narrative before your opponents can build momentum. Will it work? Depends on how fast we move. Ethan was already dialing. Sarah? It's Ethan Calloway. I need to meet with you tonight. I have evidence of a conspiracy involving a murdered whistleblower, a corrupt NYPD detective, and an international cover-up. Yes, tonight. I'll come to you. He ended the call and looked at Sophie. Get ready. We're going to FBI headquarters. And we're bringing everything. They spent the next 2 hours preparing. Maya burned drives with copies of every financial record, every phone log, every piece of evidence they'd gathered. Omar gave a recorded statement with federal marshals as witnesses. Sophie wrote out a timeline of everything she knew about her father's last weeks, every detail she dismissed as paranoia or stress. At midnight, they loaded into 2 cars, Sophie, Ethan, and Maya in one. Omar and his federal protection detail in another, and drove to the FBI field office in Lower Manhattan. Special Agent Sarah Chen met them at a secure entrance. She was maybe 45 with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone who'd seen enough bullshit to last 3 lifetimes. Ethan, she shook his hand. This better be as important as you said. It is, trust me. They spent the next 4 hours in a conference room, walking Agent Chen through everything. The forged treaty, Omar's testimony, Webb's payments from Mansour, the cover-up of Ahmad Bennett's murder, every piece of evidence Maya had compiled. Agent Chen listened without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. When they finished, she sat back and rubbed her temples. This is a nightmare, she said. But you believe us? Sophie asked. I believe you have evidence that warrants serious investigation. Chen looked at Omar. Your testimony alone is enough to open a case against Webb. Add in the financial records, and we've got conspiracy. The question is whether we can prove Sterling knew about the murder. He knew. Ethan's voice was certain. He paid Mansour. Mansour paid Webb. Webb arranged the hit. It's a straight line. It's a straight line you have to prove in court, and Sterling has very expensive lawyers who will argue he paid Mansour for legitimate legal services and had no knowledge of what Mansour did with that money. Chen sighed. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying this is going to be hard. Hard is fine. Sophie leaned forward. Impossible would be a problem. Hard just means we work harder. Chen almost smiled. Okay, here's what happens next. We open an official investigation into Detective Marcus Webb. We'll bring him in for questioning tomorrow morning before he knows we have Omar's testimony. If we can get him to flip on Mansour or Sterling, this case gets a lot easier. And if he doesn't flip? Maya asked. Then we build the case piece by piece until we have enough to indict everyone involved. Chen stood up. In the meantime, all of you are material witnesses. That means federal protection until this is resolved. How long will that take? Sophie asked. Months, maybe a year. Chen's expression was sympathetic. I know that's not what you want to hear, but this is how justice works, slowly and carefully. Sophie wanted to scream, wanted to flip the table and demand they arrest Sterling and Mansour right now, tonight, before they could hurt anyone else. But she didn't, because Agent Chen was right. This was how it worked. Okay, Sophie said, we'll do it your way. They left the FBI building as dawn was breaking over the city. Sophie was so tired she could barely walk straight, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. You should sleep, Ethan said as James drove them back to Brooklyn. Can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see that car exploding behind us. That'll fade eventually. Does it? Sophie looked at him. For you? Sometimes. Ethan stared out the window at the lightening sky. My therapist says I have unresolved trauma. I told her I'll resolve it when I'm dead. Despite everything, Sophie laughed. That's not healthy. No, but it's honest. Back at the safe house, Sophie finally crashed. She slept for 6 hours straight and woke to find Ethan in the kitchen making coffee that smelled like it cost $50 a pound. Agent Chen called. He handed her a mug. They picked up Webb 2 hours ago. He's being questioned now. Did he say anything? Not yet, but they're not charging him yet either. They're using the financial evidence as leverage, offering him a deal if he cooperates. Sophie sipped the coffee. It tasted like hope and exhaustion. What kind of deal? Reduced sentence in exchange for testimony against Mansour and Sterling. Full disclosure about who ordered your father's murder and how they covered it up. You think he'll take it? I think Webb is a coward who became a dirty cop because he liked money more than integrity. Cowards talk when they're scared. Ethan's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his expression darkened. Shit. What? He showed her the screen. A news alert. Damian Sterling holds press conference, denies all charges. Sophie grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. Sterling stood behind a podium flanked by his lawyers, looking every inch the wronged businessman. He spoke about his decades of service to the financial community, his charitable work, the coordinated attack against him by competitors and disgruntled former associates. And I want to address the particularly cruel accusation being spread by Ms. Sophie Bennett. Sterling looked directly into the camera, and Sophie felt like he was looking into her soul. Ms. Bennett's father was investigated for corruption in Dubai. Those charges were legitimate and based on substantial evidence. It's tragic that Ms. Bennett can't accept her father's guilt, but her attempt to rehabilitate his reputation by destroying mine is both transparent and despicable. That son of a bitch, Sophie breathed. I have filed defamation suits against Ms. Bennett and several other parties involved in this conspiracy. Sterling's smile was cold. I will not rest until my name is cleared and those responsible are held accountable. The press conference ended. Sophie stared at the screen, feeling like she'd been punched. He's suing me, she said. For telling the truth, he's suing me. Let him. Ethan's voice was steel. Every word he just said is on record. When the FBI proves he's lying, that press conference becomes evidence of obstruction. If they prove it. When they prove it, Ethan took the remote and turned off the TV. Have a little faith, Sophie. Faith in what? The system that let my father die? Faith in yourself. Ethan met her eyes. You didn't stay quiet when it mattered. You spoke up. You told the truth. That took courage most people don't have. Before Sophie could respond, Ethan's phone rang. He answered, listened for a moment, then his expression shifted to something Sophie couldn't read. Say that again, he said quietly. He listened for another minute, then ended the call. That was Agent Chen. Webb is talking. Sophie's heart stopped. He took the deal? He took the deal. He's giving them everything. Who ordered the hit, how they covered it up, where the money came from. All of it. Ethan's smile was fierce. We've got them, Sophie. It's over. But Sophie had learned enough in the last 24 hours to know it wasn't over. Not yet. What's the catch? She asked. Ethan's smile faded slightly. Webb says Sterling and Mansour are planning to leave the country. Tonight. Private plane to a jurisdiction with no extradition treaty. Can the FBI stop them? They're working on it. But they need probable cause for an arrest warrant, and right now they have Webb's testimony but no physical evidence directly linking Sterling to the murder order. So they're going to get away. Not if we move fast. Ethan was already texting someone. Maya's tracking Sterling's movements. If we can figure out when and where he's planning to run, we can force the FBI's hand. Sophie's phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. You should have stayed quiet, little girl. Your father made the same mistake. She showed it to Ethan, whose expression went dark. That's a threat, a direct threat. He forwarded the message to Agent Chen. They're getting desperate. Good, Sophie said, surprised by the anger in her own voice. Let them be desperate. Let them be scared. They've had 4 years of sleeping peacefully while I fell apart. Now it's their turn. Ethan looked at her with something like respect. You're tougher than you look. I'm my father's daughter. Sophie stood up, setting down her coffee. What do we do next? We find Sterling, and we make sure he doesn't get on that plane. Maya called 20 minutes later with coordinates that sent them racing toward Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. Sterling's private jet was scheduled for departure at 8 p.m., less than 6 hours away. He filed a flight plan to Grand Cayman, Maya said through the car speaker as James navigated evening traffic. But I'm betting that's a decoy. Once he's in the air, he can divert anywhere. Bahamas, UAE, anywhere without extradition. Can the FBI ground the plane? Sophie asked. Not without a warrant. And they don't have enough for a warrant yet. Webb's testimony alone isn't sufficient, and the financial evidence takes time to verify. Maya's frustration bled through the phone. Legally, Sterling's a free man until they formally charge him. So we just watch him leave? Sophie's hands clenched into fists. After everything? No. Ethan's voice was cold and certain. We don't watch. We act. Act how? Maya asked. Because I'm all for bold moves, but I'd prefer ones that don't land us in federal prison. Ethan was quiet for a moment, thinking. Sophie could practically see the gears turning in his head. What if we give the FBI what they need? Physical evidence linking Sterling directly to the conspiracy. Like what? A signed confession? A recording of him ordering the hit? Maya's tone was sarcastic. Those don't exactly grow on trees. No. But Sterling's been sloppy. Desperate people make mistakes. Ethan pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. Webb said Sterling and Mansour are meeting before the flight. Where? Tracking Mansour's phone now. Give me a second. The sound of rapid typing. Okay, his phone just pinged a tower near Sterling's penthouse in Manhattan, Upper East Side. They're meeting at his home. Ethan leaned forward. James, change of plans. Take us to Sterling's building. Boss, that's a bad idea. James met Ethan's eyes in the rearview mirror. You walk into that building, you're putting yourself in their crosshairs. I'm not walking in, I'm watching who comes out. Ethan was already texting someone, and I'm making sure someone with a badge sees it too. Sophie understood what he was planning. You're going to force their hand. Make them panic so they slip up. Exactly. Sterling thinks he's got time to plan this carefully. We take away that time, he'll make mistakes. Or he'll kill someone else, Maya said flatly. Not in broad daylight in Manhattan with FBI surveillance. Ethan's confidence was either reassuring or terrifying. Sophie couldn't decide which. Agent Chen, are you getting this? Sophie hadn't realized Chen was on the call too. I'm hearing it. Chen's voice was tight. And I'm officially advising you to stay away from Sterling's residence. This is an active investigation. Noted. We'll stay on public property and observe from a distance. Calloway, you said you needed physical evidence. I'm trying to get it for you. Ethan's tone was respectful but firm. Just have units ready to move if something happens. Chen was silent for a long moment. I have agents en route to Teterboro. If Sterling tries to board that plane, we'll detain him for questioning. And Mansour? Working on a warrant. His asylum in Dubai means this gets complicated diplomatically, but we're pushing it through. Another pause. Don't do anything stupid, Ethan. Define stupid. Chen hung up without answering. They parked 2 blocks from Sterling's building, a glass and steel tower that screamed wealth in a neighborhood where wealth was the baseline. James positioned the car with a clear view of the entrance while Ethan set up a camera with a telephoto lens. You just carry surveillance equipment around? Sophie asked. I carry a lot of things around. Ethan adjusted the focus. Occupational hazard. Sophie watched people come and go from the building. Dog walkers with animals that probably cost more than her car. Women in athleisure that cost more than her monthly rent. A doorman in a uniform so crisp it looked uncomfortable. There! Ethan zoomed in on a town car pulling up to the entrance. That's Mansour's vehicle. Hassan Mansour stepped out, looking around nervously before hurrying inside. He ditched the expensive suit for something more casual, but his body language screamed anxiety. He's scared, Sophie observed. Good. Scared people talk. Ethan was taking rapid-fire photos. Or they run. Either works for us. They waited. 15 minutes passed, then 30. Sophie's leg bounced with nervous energy until Ethan gently put a hand on her knee. Patience. They're planning their exit strategy. That takes time. How do you know? Because I've had to plan a few myself. Back when I was building the company, there were some close calls with regulatory issues. You learn to have contingency plans. Ethan didn't take his eyes off the camera. The trick is making people think you're more prepared than you actually are. Are they? More prepared than we think? Probably not. Sterling's been untouchable for so long, he's forgotten what it's like to actually face consequences. And Mansour's used to operating in jurisdictions where money buys silence. They're improvising, which means they're vulnerable. A delivery truck pulled up to the building's service entrance. Ethan's posture changed immediately, going tense and alert. That's not a normal delivery, he said. How can you tell? Timing. Most buildings this size have scheduled delivery windows, morning and early afternoon. It's almost 6 p.m., and look at the driver. Sophie squinted. The driver was big, built like someone who spent serious time in a gym. He moved with precision, not the casual efficiency of someone making routine deliveries. Private security, Ethan said. Probably hired to escort them out through the service entrance. Smart, but not smart enough. He called Maya. I need you to run plates on a delivery truck. White Ford, license plate. He rattled off the numbers. Fast. On it. Maya's typing was audible. Registered to a security company called Titan Executive Protection. High-end stuff. They do extraction services for executives in unstable regions. Extraction services. Ethan's laugh was humorless. They're treating this like a hostile evacuation. Should I call Chen? Sophie asked. Not yet. Let's see where they go first. 10 minutes later, the service door opened. Sterling emerged first. Wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap like that would somehow make him less recognizable. Mansour followed, constantly looking over his shoulder. They climbed into the back of the truck. James, follow them. Stay back at least 3 cars. James pulled into traffic smoothly, keeping the white truck in view but not obviously tailing it. Sophie's heart hammered as they wound through Manhattan streets, heading south toward the Holland Tunnel. They're going to Jersey, James said. Probably straight to Teterboro. Then we've got maybe 40 minutes before they're in the air. Ethan was already calling Chen. They're moving, leaving Sterling's building in a white Ford delivery truck, heading south on Park Avenue. We're following. I told you to stay out of this. But Chen didn't sound angry, just resigned. You also said you needed evidence. I'm getting it for you. Where are they heading? Our guess is Teterboro. Can you have units waiting? Already done. We'll intercept at the airport. Chen paused. Don't engage them, Ethan. I mean it. You're a civilian, and if this goes wrong, it won't. You don't know that. No, but I'm betting on it anyway. The truck headed into the tunnel, and for a few minutes they were enclosed in concrete and artificial light. Sophie felt the weight of the city pressing down, all those tons of river and earth and buildings above them. Then they were through, in New Jersey, and the truck was accelerating toward the highway. They're in a hurry, James observed. They know we're following, Ethan said quietly. How? Because I would know. And Sterling didn't get where he is by being stupid. Ethan checked his phone. Maya, I need traffic cam footage of our route. See if anyone else is tailing us. Checking now. Okay. Yeah. You've got a black SUV 3 cars back. Been with you since you left Sterling's building. Sophie twisted to look through the rear window. Sure enough, a dark SUV sat in traffic behind them, windows tinted, no front plate. Friends of theirs? She asked. Or they hired more security than we thought. Ethan's jaw tightened. James, can you lose them? In this traffic? Maybe. But it'll be obvious we're trying to lose them. Do it anyway. I don't want backup when we get to the airport. James didn't argue. He took the next exit fast, cutting across 2 lanes and earning angry horn blasts from other drivers. The SUV tried to follow, but got blocked by a semi. James took 3 more rapid turns through an industrial area, then got back on the highway heading north. The SUV was nowhere in sight. Lost them, James said with satisfaction. For now. Ethan was tracking their location on his phone, but we also lost Sterling's truck. They exited 2 miles back, Maya said through the speaker. I'm tracking them on traffic cams. They're taking surface streets toward Teterboro, probably trying to avoid highway cameras. Can you stay with them? As long as they stay on major roads, yes. If they go into the industrial area near the airport, I'll lose them. No cameras. Then we need to catch up. Ethan looked at James. Fast as you safely can. Define safely. However you want to define it. James smiled grimly and floored it. They made it to Teterboro in 23 minutes, which probably violated several traffic laws. The airport was smaller than Sophie expected. No massive terminals or commercial gates. Just private hangars and small buildings scattered across flat terrain. Where's the FBI? Sophie asked, scanning for any sign of law enforcement. Good question, Ethan called Chen. We're at Teterboro. Where are your units? Delayed. There was an accident on Route 3, blocked both lanes. We're stuck in traffic. Chen sounded furious. ETA is 15 minutes. We don't have 15 minutes. Sterling's truck is already here. Then you wait for us. Do not, I repeat, do not approach Sterling or attempt any kind of confrontation. Understood. Ethan ended the call. You're not going to wait, are you? Sophie asked. Would you? Sophie thought about her father. About 4 years of silence and grief and believing justice was impossible. About finally having the people responsible within reach. No, she said. I wouldn't wait. Then let's go. James drove them around the perimeter until they spotted the white truck parked near a private hangar. Through the open hangar doors, Sophie could see a sleek jet being prepped for flight. That's a Gulfstream G650, Ethan said. 12-hour range. He could be in Dubai before the FBI even finishes the warrant. So what do we do? Ethan was quiet, thinking. Then he pulled out his phone and started recording a video. What are you doing? Sophie asked. Insurance. He pointed the camera at the hangar, zooming in on Sterling and Mansour as they climbed the jet stairs. If they take off before the FBI gets here, at least we'll have proof they fled. But Sophie had stopped listening, because walking across the tarmac toward the jet was someone she recognized. Detective Marcus Webb, no longer in custody, wearing civilian clothes and carrying a briefcase. That's not possible, Sophie breathed. Webb was in FBI custody. How is he here? Ethan's expression went dark. Maya, I need Webb's current status, now. Checking federal database. Okay, this is weird. Webb was released 2 hours ago. Released? He was supposed to be giving testimony. According to this, his lawyer filed a motion claiming the arrest was illegal, something about a warrant technicality. A judge ordered his immediate release pending a hearing. Maya's voice was tight with fury. Someone got to the judge. Had to be. Sterling has judges on his payroll? Sophie felt sick. Sterling has everyone on his payroll. Ethan was already out of the car, camera still recording. That's how men like him operate. They own the system. Where are you going? To get close enough for this camera to pick up audio. If they say anything incriminating, we'll have it on record. That's insane. They'll see you. Good. Let them. Ethan started walking toward the hangar, not bothering with stealth or subtlety, just walking across the tarmac like he owned it. Sophie scrambled out of the car, James close behind her. Miss Bennett, you should stay back, James said. Yeah, well, nobody listens to good advice today. They followed Ethan at a distance, staying near the parked cars in case they needed cover. Sophie's heart was trying to punch through her chest. Ethan got within 50 feet of the jet before Sterling noticed him. The businessman's face went from confident to shocked to furious in the span of 2 seconds. Calloway, Sterling's voice carried across the tarmac. You've got some nerve showing up here. Just documenting your departure. Ethan held up his phone, making the recording obvious. For posterity. You're trespassing on private property. Actually, Teterboro is a public airport. I have every right to be here. Ethan kept walking closer. Besides, I thought you'd want witnesses for your escape. Escape? Sterling laughed, but it sounded forced. I'm taking a business trip. Last I checked, that wasn't illegal. It is when you're fleeing an active FBI investigation. What investigation? I was released. All charges dropped. Sterling gestured to Webb. Even the good detective here realized his mistake in trusting your little waitress and her fairy tales. Webb wouldn't meet Ethan's eyes. They paid you, Ethan said to Webb. How much? What's the going rate for betraying your oath? Careful, Calloway. Webb's hand moved to his waist, where Sophie could see the outline of a gun. That sounds like slander. It's only slander if it's not true. Ethan didn't back down. And we both know it's true. You murdered Ahmad Bennett on Sterling and Mansour's orders. You covered it up, and now you're helping them flee the country before anyone can prove it. You can't prove shit. Webb's voice was aggressive now, compensating for something. Fear, probably. You've got the testimony of a mechanic who's already admitted to being a paid liar. You've got some financial records that prove nothing except legitimate business transactions. And you've got a waitress with a grudge trying to clear her criminal father's name. Sophie stepped forward before she could stop herself. My father wasn't a criminal. You know that. Sterling knows that. Mansour knows that. He found out about your forgery operation and you killed him for it. Prove it. Sterling's smile was cold. Oh, wait, you can't, because it never happened. Webb already confessed, Ethan said, to the FBI. We have his testimony on record. Had. Sterling's smile widened. Past tense. Detective Webb has since recanted his statement, citing coercion and improper interrogation techniques. Isn't that right, Detective? Webb nodded. I was pressured into making false statements. My lawyer is filing a complaint against the agents involved. They paid you. Sophie was shaking with rage. How much? How much did it cost to buy your soul? Enough. Webb's hand tightened on his gun. Now I suggest you all back away before this becomes a security situation. Security situation? Ethan laughed, harsh and bitter. That's what you're calling murder now. I'm calling it trespassing by hostile individuals on private property during a sensitive business departure. Webb pulled out his phone. Airport security is already on their way. Unless you want to be arrested, I suggest you leave. We're not going anywhere, Sophie said. Sophie, James's voice was low and urgent. We should listen to him. Airport security won't care about the investigation. They'll arrest us for trespassing and let Sterling fly out. He was right. Sophie knew he was right. But the thought of watching Sterling and Mansour board that jet, of watching them escape while her father stayed dead and disgraced, was unbearable. No. Her voice came out stronger than she felt. We stay. Ethan looked at her and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or just shared stubbornness. We stay, he agreed. Sterling's expression darkened. Fine. Have it your way. He nodded to Webb. Detain them. Use whatever force is necessary. Webb drew his gun. Sophie's world narrowed to that single point, the barrel of a weapon aimed at her chest, held by a man who'd already murdered one member of her family. You won't shoot, Ethan said calmly. Not here. Not with witnesses and cameras everywhere. Won't I? Webb's hand was steady. You're trespassing on private property, acting aggressively toward a police officer. I have every right to defend myself. Except you're not on duty, you're not in uniform, and you've already been identified as a co-conspirator in a murder investigation. Ethan's phone was still recording, capturing everything. Anything you do here just adds to the charges. What charges? There are no charges. The case is closed. But Webb's voice wavered slightly. That's when Sophie heard it. The sound of sirens in the distance, getting closer. Sterling heard it too. His face went pale. Get on the plane! Now! Mansour, who'd been silent through the entire confrontation, finally spoke. This is insane. We should have left an hour ago. Shut up and get on the plane. But the sirens were louder now, and Sophie could see flashing lights approaching through the airport gates. The FBI had arrived. Sterling saw it too. His calculated composure cracked completely. Webb, stop them! Do whatever you have to do! Webb raised the gun higher, his hand shaking now. Sophie could see the panic in his eyes, the desperate calculation of a cornered animal. Put the gun down, detective. A new voice cut through the tension. Agent Chen emerged from an unmarked car that had somehow appeared during the confrontation, her own weapon drawn and aimed at Webb. It's over. It's not over. Webb's voice was high and strained. I'm a decorated police officer. You can't... You're a murderer who took money to kill a whistleblower. Chen's voice was steel. And right now you're pointing a weapon at civilians in front of multiple federal agents. Put the gun down. For a long moment, nobody moved. Sophie could hear her own heartbeat, loud and frantic. Then Webb lowered the gun slowly and set it on the tarmac. Smart choice. Chen gestured, and two agents moved in to cuff him. She looked at Sterling and Mansour. Gentlemen, you're both under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. obstruction of justice, and about 6 other charges we're still finalizing. You can't arrest me. Sterling's voice was desperate now, all pretense of control gone. I have diplomatic connections. You have the right to remain silent. Chen cut him off. I suggest you use it. More agents swarmed the tarmac, securing the scene. Someone led Webb away in handcuffs. Sterling and Mansour were separated, each surrounded by agents reading them their rights. Sophie watched it all happen like she was outside her body. 4 years of grief and rage and helplessness, and suddenly it was over, just like that. Handcuffs and Miranda rights, and the cold efficiency of justice. You okay? Ethan was beside her, his hand on her shoulder. I don't know. Sophie's voice sounded strange. Is it really over? The arrest part is. The trial part is going to take a while. Ethan squeezed her shoulder gently. But yeah, they're not getting away. Chen walked over, holstering her weapon. That was incredibly stupid. You know that, right? Yeah. Ethan didn't look apologetic. But it worked. It worked because we got here in time. If we'd been 5 minutes later, Webb might have actually shot someone. Chen looked at Sophie. You okay, Ms. Bennett? I've been better. Sophie's hands were shaking again. But yeah, I'm okay. Good. Because I'm going to need detailed statements from both of you. Everything that was said here, everything you observed. Chen glanced at Ethan's phone. And I'm going to need that recording. Already uploading it to a secure server. Ethan showed her the screen. You'll have access in about 2 minutes. Of course you are. Chen shook her head. Come on, let's get you both out of here before the media shows up. The media. Sophie hadn't even thought about that. But as they walked toward Chen's car, she could already see news vans pulling up to the airport perimeter. They're going to want your story, Chen said. Both of you. My advice? Don't talk to anyone until after the trial. Let the evidence speak for itself. What about Sterling's defamation suit? Sophie asked. He's suing me for clearing my father's name. That lawsuit is going to disappear real fast once he's indicted for murder. Chen opened the car door. And when this is all over, you'll have grounds for a countersuit that'll bury him. Sophie climbed into the back seat, exhaustion hitting her all at once. Ethan slid in beside her, and James took the driver's seat, with Chen in front. As they drove away from Teterboro, Sophie looked back at the tarmac. Sterling and Mansour were being loaded into separate vehicles, their expensive clothes and confident postures reduced to the orange glow of police lights. My father would have wanted to see this, Sophie said quietly. He did see it. Ethan's voice was gentle. Maybe not literally, but you finished what he started. You made sure the truth came out. That counts for something. Does it? Sophie wiped her eyes, frustrated with herself for crying. He's still gone. They took 4 years from me. 4 years of thinking I was alone and crazy and that justice was impossible. You're not crazy. You were right. Ethan pulled out his phone, showing her the video he'd recorded. And now everyone's going to know you were right. Sophie watched the footage, Sterling's face when he realized the FBI had arrived, Webb's hand shaking as he held the gun, Mansour's panicked voice insisting they should have left earlier. Can I get a copy of that? She asked. Already sent to your phone. Ethan pocketed his device. For when you need a reminder that you won. We won, Sophie corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Sure you could have. It might have taken longer, but you would have found a way. Ethan leaned back against the seat, looking exhausted. You're stubborn like that. Despite everything, Sophie smiled. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. Though yeah, I guess it's a compliment too. They drove in silence for a while, the city lights of Manhattan visible in the distance. Sophie's phone started buzzing, texts and calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Reporters probably, somehow already tracking her down. She turned the phone off. Smart, Chen said from the front seat. The media circus is going to be intense for a while. You might want to consider staying at a secure location until things calm down. She can stay at my place, Ethan said. I've got security, privacy, and enough lawyers on retainer to handle any harassment. Sophie looked at him. Your place? Like your actual home? I have several. Pick whichever one sounds least intimidating. Ethan's smile was tired. Or go back to the safe house in Brooklyn. Your choice. I just don't want you dealing with cameras and reporters while you're trying to process all this. What about you? Won't they come after you too?
They'll try. But I've been dealing with aggressive media for years. I know how to make them go away. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Besides, I need to get back to Emma. I've been away too long. Your daughter. Yeah, my sister's been covering, but Emma needs her dad. He opened his eyes again. You should meet her sometime. She'd like you. Why would a 7-year-old like me? Because you're brave and you tell the truth even when it's hard. Those are good qualities to be around. Ethan's expression softened. And because she's been asking why Daddy's been so busy lately, it might be nice for her to meet the person who's worth being busy for. Sophie didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to process that this billionaire who'd gone to war for her now wanted to introduce her to his daughter. I'd like that, she said finally. Chen dropped them at a building in Tribeca. Different from the office, more residential. The lobby was all marble and modern art, with a doorman who greeted Ethan by name. Welcome home, Mr. Calloway. Should I have the apartment prepared for a guest? Yes, please. East bedroom and stock the kitchen with whatever Sophie might need. Ethan looked at her. Any dietary restrictions? I eat anything that doesn't cost $50 a plate, Sophie said, then immediately regretted the bitterness in her tone. But Ethan just smiled. Fair enough. Marcus, normal groceries, nothing intimidating. The doorman nodded like this was a perfectly reasonable request. They took an elevator that required a key to access the penthouse floor. When the doors opened, Sophie stepped into an apartment that looked nothing like she expected. No cold minimalism or sterile luxury. Instead, there were books everywhere, mismatched furniture that looked actually comfortable, and evidence of a child's presence. Art projects stuck to the fridge, toys in a basket by the couch, a small pink backpack hanging by the door. This is normal, Sophie said. Were you expecting a villain's lair? Ethan hung up his coat. I'm a single dad with a 7-year-old. My life is chaos held together by routine and caffeine. As if on cue, a door burst open and a small tornado in the form of Emma Calloway came running out. Daddy! She launched herself at Ethan, who caught her easily. Hey, Bug, I thought you were at Aunt Sarah's. She brought me home because you texted that you were coming back. Emma wrapped her arms around his neck. Did you catch the bad guys? We did. Ethan set her down gently. Emma, this is Sophie. She's a friend who helped catch the bad guys. Emma turned to study Sophie with serious gray eyes. Were you scared? Terrified, Sophie admitted. But you did it anyway? Yeah, I did it anyway. Emma nodded, apparently satisfied. That's what Daddy says bravery is. Being scared but doing it anyway. She looked up at Ethan. Can Sophie stay for dinner? Aunt Sarah made too much pasta and she said we should share. Sophie can stay as long as she wants, Ethan said. And sitting there in that normal apartment with its scattered toys and comfortable mess, eating leftover pasta with a billionaire and his daughter who asked normal 7-year-old questions about favorite colors and whether Sophie liked dinosaurs, Sophie felt something shift inside her. For 4 years, she'd been frozen in grief. Stuck in the moment she'd lost her father, unable to move forward because justice felt impossible. But justice wasn't impossible. It was just hard and slow and required help from people willing to fight alongside you. You're smiling, Emma observed. That's good. Daddy says people should smile more. Your daddy's right, Sophie said. After dinner, Emma went to bed and Sophie found herself on the couch with Ethan, both of them too exhausted to do anything but sit in comfortable silence. Thank you, Sophie said finally, for everything, for believing me, for helping me, for all of it. You don't have to thank me. I do, though, because you didn't have to do any of this. You could have just walked away after the first night. Let me handle it alone. No, I couldn't. Ethan looked at her seriously. I told you before, I don't believe in coincidences. You being in that restaurant the night Sterling tried to scam me, that wasn't random. That was, I don't know, fate, maybe, or just dumb luck. But either way, walking away wasn't an option. You don't really believe in fate, no? Ethan smiled slightly. But I believe in making sure people like Sterling don't win. And I believe people like your father deserve justice, even if it takes 4 years. Sophie's phone buzzed, the new one, the secure one Ethan had given her. A text from Agent Chen. Trial date set for 8 months from now.
Webb is cooperating again, real cooperation this time. Sterling and Mansour both denied bail. You did good today. 8 months, Sophie said, showing Ethan the message. 8 months until they're convicted, then sentencing, then appeals. It'll be years before this is completely over. I can wait years. I've already waited 4. Yeah, but you don't have to wait alone anymore. Ethan stood up, stretching. Guest room is made up. Stay as long as you need. Days, weeks, whatever. And tomorrow, we start planning your next steps. Next steps? You're not going back to waiting tables, Sophie. You're too smart for that. You speak multiple languages. You can analyze complex legal documents, and you just helped take down an international conspiracy. That's worth more than minimum wage plus tips. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you work for me, officially. In my historical intelligence division, the one I told you about. Authenticating documents, investigating fraud, protecting international contracts. It's exactly what your father trained you for. Sophie stared at him. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a career, one that honors your father's work and uses your actual skills. Ethan's expression was sincere. But only if you want it. No pressure. You've earned the right to choose what comes next. Sophie thought about the velvet room, about smiling at men who looked through her, about going home to an empty apartment and wondering if her father's death would ever mean anything. I want it, she said. The job. I want it. Good. Ethan smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. Then we'll talk details tomorrow. Tonight, get some sleep. You've earned it. Sophie did sleep in a guest room that was nicer than any apartment she'd ever rented, and for the first time in 4 years, she didn't dream about her father's death. She dreamed about his life, about the way he'd taught her Arabic with infinite patience, about his smile when she got a translation right, about the pride in his voice when he told her she was brilliant, and when she woke up the next morning to sunlight and the sound of Emma singing in another room, Sophie realized something important. Her father was gone. That would always hurt. But his legacy wasn't the false corruption charges or the manufactured scandal. His legacy was the truth, and Sophie had made sure the truth survived. That was enough. The media circus lasted 3 weeks before Sophie stopped being interesting enough to chase. 3 weeks of photographers camped outside Ethan's building, reporters shouting questions whenever she left, op-eds debating whether she was a hero or an opportunist looking for her 15 minutes. Maya had warned her it would be brutal, and Maya was right about most things. Sophie learned to ignore it, learned to walk past cameras like they were street furniture, learned that the truth didn't need defending to people who'd already made up their minds based on a headline. What surprised her was how quickly normal life tried to reassert itself. Emma still needed help with her homework. The apartment still needed groceries. Coffee still tasted better in the morning than at night. The world kept turning regardless of whether Sophie Bennett had exposed an international murder conspiracy or not. You're quiet today. Ethan looked up from the financial report he was reviewing. They were in his home office, a room that somehow managed to be both professional and comfortable, with Emma's artwork taped to the wall behind his desk. Just thinking. Sophie closed the Arabic legal text she'd been studying. 3 weeks into her new job, and she was still getting used to the idea that reading historical documents counted as work. About how weird this all is. A month ago, I was serving drinks to people who didn't know my name. Now I'm sitting in a penthouse analyzing Ottoman-era contracts like it's normal. Is it good weird or bad weird? Sophie considered. Honestly, I don't know yet. Ask me after the trial. The trial. It loomed over everything, a fixed point 8 months in the future that would determine whether the last month meant anything at all. Ethan set down his report. Webb's lawyer contacted Agent Chen yesterday. He wants to negotiate a plea deal. I thought he already had one. He did. Then he violated it by recanting his testimony. Now he's scrambling to get back in the FBI's good graces before they add perjury and obstruction charges. Ethan's smile was grim. Turns out loyalty to Sterling only extends as far as the paycheck. When that dried up, so did Webb's willingness to go down alone. What's he offering? Everything. Financial records showing payments from Sterling and Mansour going back 6 years. Communications about your father's investigation. Details about at least 3 other cases where they manufactured evidence to discredit whistleblowers. Ethan paused. And he's willing to testify that Sterling personally ordered your father's murder. Sophie's breath caught. Personally. Webb says Sterling called him directly, told him Ahmad Bennett was a problem that needed to disappear permanently, offered him $500,000 to make it look like an accident. $500,000. That's what her father's life had been worth to Damian Sterling, less than what the man probably spent on art for his office. Does Chen believe him? She's verifying the details, but yeah, Webb's story matches the financial evidence and Omar's testimony. It's credible. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Sterling's lawyers know it too. They've been trying to negotiate their own deal. What kind of deal? The kind where Sterling pleads to lesser charges in exchange for giving up his co-conspirators. Mansour mostly. Maybe some of the investors who helped launder money through the forged contracts. Ethan's expression darkened. Chen told them to go to hell. Good. Yeah, but it means Sterling's going to trial fighting. He'll throw everything at us. Character assassination, procedural challenges, appeals to every technicality his lawyers can find. It's going to be ugly. Sophie had expected that. Men like Sterling didn't go quietly. They burned everything on their way down, hoping the flames would obscure their guilt. Let it be ugly, she said. I'm not afraid of ugly anymore. Emma burst into the office without knocking, her backpack trailing behind her. Sophie, you have to help me with my science project. Daddy doesn't understand photosynthesis. I understand photosynthesis fine, Ethan protested. I just don't understand why your teacher wants you to build a model of it using household items. Because that's how science works. Emma grabbed Sophie's hand. Come on. We need cardboard and markers and those little pom-pom things from the craft box. Sophie let herself be pulled from the office, Ethan's amused expression following them out. In the 3 weeks she'd been staying here, Emma had decided Sophie was her new favorite person. They'd baked cookies that came out slightly burned, watched movies about talking animals, and had serious discussions about whether unicorns would be good pets. It was the kind of normal Sophie hadn't realized she'd been missing. The kind of family feeling that had died with her father and left a hole she'd tried to fill with work and silence. They spent 2 hours building a photosynthesis model that looked more like abstract art than science, Emma chattering the entire time about her teacher and her friends, and whether Sophie thought horses were better than dolphins. Horses, Sophie said definitively. Dolphins are just ocean horses with attitude problems. Emma giggled so hard she nearly knocked over the model. That's what I said. But Macy in my class says dolphins are smarter. Smarter doesn't mean better. Horses let you ride them. Dolphins just laugh at you and swim away. See, Daddy? Emma called toward the office. Sophie gets it. Later, after Emma was in bed and the apartment had settled into quiet, Sophie found Ethan on the balcony. The city spread out below them. Millions of lights that represented millions of lives, all of them unaware that somewhere in this vast machine, justice was slowly grinding forward. She's getting attached to you, Ethan said without looking away from the view. Emma. I'm getting attached to her too. Sophie joined him at the railing. Is that a problem? No, but it's something we should talk about. Ethan finally looked at her. You've been here 3 weeks. Technically, you're still just staying temporarily until things calm down, but Emma's starting to think of you as part of the household, and I need to know if that's going to break her heart when you leave. Do you want me to leave? That's not what I asked. Sophie watched the city lights blur slightly. When had she started crying? I don't know what I want. A month ago, my entire life fit in a studio apartment in Queens and a locker at work. Now I'm living in a penthouse, working a job that actually uses my brain, and apparently co-parenting a 7-year-old who thinks I'm cool because I agree with her about dolphins. You are cool. I'm a mess, Ethan. I have nightmares about my father's car going over that cliff. I wake up at 3 a.m. convinced Sterling's going to send someone to finish what they started. I can't walk past the velvet room without feeling sick. Sophie wiped her face roughly. Emma deserves better than someone who's still figuring out how to be a functioning human. Emma deserves someone who shows up and cares about her. You do both of those things. Ethan's voice was gentle. As for being a mess, welcome to parenthood. I'm terrified every single day that I'm screwing her up, that she'll grow up and resent me for working too much, or not being her mother, or any of the 1,000 ways I fail at this. You're a good father. I'm an adequate father who tries really hard. There's a difference. Ethan smiled slightly. But Emma's happy. She feels safe. And part of that recently is because you've been here.
She likes having another adult around who isn't me or my sister. What are you saying? I'm saying you don't have to leave unless you want to. The guest room is yours as long as you need it. The job is yours regardless of where you live. And if you want to stick around and keep arguing with Emma about dolphins, that's okay too. Sophie looked at him. Really looked at him. The exhaustion that never quite left his face, the careful way he held himself, like someone who'd learned early that showing vulnerability was dangerous. The quiet competence he brought to everything, from dismantling international conspiracies to helping his daughter with homework. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Really? Not the investigation, I understand that. But this, letting me stay, involving me in your life, trusting me with Emma." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Because I spent 2 years after my wife died being so focused on not falling apart that I forgot how to let people in. I told myself Emma and I were fine alone, that we didn't need anyone else, and we were fine. But fine isn't the same as happy. And you're happy now?" "I'm getting there." He looked at her directly. "And I think maybe you are too, despite everything. Despite the nightmares and the fear and the trial hanging over us, you're starting to breathe again." He was right. Sophie hadn't realized it until he said it, but he was right. The constant weight in her chest had lightened. Not disappeared, maybe it never would, but lightened enough that she could take full breaths without feeling like she was drowning. "I want to stay," she said quietly. "If the offer's real, I want to stay. It's real." They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the city that had almost destroyed them both. Somewhere out there, Sterling and Mansour sat in federal detention, their empires crumbling. Webb was in protective custody, probably regretting every choice that led him to this point. And Omar was in a witness protection program, finally safe after 4 years of running. The pieces were falling into place, slowly, messily, but falling nonetheless. The months that followed developed their own rhythm. Sophie worked with Ethan's team authenticating documents for high-stakes international deals, her knowledge of classical Arabic and legal terminology making her invaluable. She learned about oil rights in Kazakhstan, property disputes in Morocco, historical treaties that billionaires tried to exploit for modern profit. It was fascinating work. More than that, it felt meaningful. Every forged document she caught was another Ahmad Bennett moment. Someone trying to rewrite truth for profit, stopped before they could succeed. Emma started introducing Sophie as her friend Sophie to classmates. Then, eventually, as her almost Aunt Sophie. Sophie didn't correct her. The trial date approached like a storm everyone could see coming, but nobody could stop. Agent Chen called weekly with updates. Webb's plea deal was finalized, 20 years in federal prison in exchange for complete cooperation. Omar's testimony was rehearsed and re-rehearsed until he could recite it in his sleep. The financial evidence was organized into presentations that even a jury without accounting degrees could follow. "It's a strong case," Chen assured them during one of their strategy meetings. "Maybe the strongest I've ever prosecuted. But Sterling's legal team is excellent. They're going to attack every weakness, every inconsistency. You need to be prepared for them to make your father sound like a criminal, and you sound like a delusional daughter seeking revenge. Let them try," Sophie said. "The evidence speaks for itself." Evidence helps, but juries are human. They respond to narratives, to emotions. Sterling's lawyers will build a narrative where he's the victim of a conspiracy. We need our narrative to be stronger. The prosecution's narrative was simple. Damian Sterling ordered Ahmad Bennett's murder to protect a forgery operation worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He paid Hassan Mansour to arrange it. Mansour paid Marcus Webb to execute it. Webb paid Omar Hassan to sabotage Ahmad's car. And when it was done, they covered it up with false corruption charges and paid officials to close the case quickly. It was the truth. But truth didn't always win in courtrooms. The trial began on a gray Tuesday in November, almost exactly a year after Sophie had walked into the Velvet Room for what should have been just another shift. The courthouse was surrounded by media, not just local news, but international crews, financial journalists, true crime podcasters, everyone drawn to the spectacle of a billionaire on trial for murder. Sophie walked past them with Ethan on one side and Agent Chen on the other, ignoring the shouted questions. Inside, the courtroom was packed. She recognized some faces, investors who'd been at that dinner, reporters who'd covered the arrest, even Marco from the restaurant,
looking uncomfortable in a suit. Sterling sat at the defense table looking thinner than Sophie remembered, his expensive suit hanging slightly loose. Mansour sat separately with his own legal team, the two men who'd conspired together now trying desperately to blame each other. The prosecution's opening statement was delivered by Chen herself, her voice calm and methodical as she laid out the conspiracy. She spoke for 45 minutes, walking the jury through 4 years of lies, payments, and murder. Sterling's lawyer countered with a narrative of persecution. His client was a successful businessman targeted by competitors and vilified by a media eager for a billionaire villain. The so-called evidence was circumstantial at best, fabricated at worst. And Sophie Bennett, well, she was a troubled woman unable to accept her father's legitimate corruption conviction. Sophie sat through it without reacting, though her hands clenched in her lap hard enough to hurt. The trial lasted 6 weeks. 6 weeks of testimony and cross-examination and technical financial evidence that made the jury's eyes glaze over. Omar took the stand and described cutting the brake lines with shaking hands and tears streaming down his face. Webb testified about receiving orders from Mansour and payments from Sterling, his voice flat and emotionless like he was describing someone else's crimes. Maya presented the financial evidence with charts and timelines that proved every payment, every transaction, every piece of the conspiracy. Historical experts confirmed the treaty was forged. Dubai officials testified about the suspicious circumstances of Ahmad's death investigation. And Sophie took the stand on a Friday afternoon, the courtroom silent as she swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor, Chen's colleague, a sharp woman named Rodriguez, walked her through that night at the Velvet Room. How she'd noticed the document, why she'd recognized the forgery, the decision to speak up despite knowing it could cost her everything. "Why did you do it?" Rodriguez asked. "Why risk your job, your safety, everything, for a stranger?" Sophie looked at the jury. 12 ordinary people who would decide if her father's death meant anything. "Because my father taught me that truth matters more than safety," she said. "He lived by that principle, and he died for it. When I saw that forged document, I had a choice: stay quiet and keep my job, or speak up and honor everything he believed in. It wasn't really a choice at all." Sterling's lawyer, a man named Ashford with silver hair and a voice like honey, tried to tear her apart on cross-examination. He asked about her father's corruption charges, her financial struggles, whether she'd seen an opportunity to exploit a wealthy man's mistake for personal gain. "You're working for Mr. Calloway now, correct?" "Yes." "Making significantly more money than you did as a waitress?" "Yes." "Convenient, isn't it? You accuse my client of fraud, and suddenly you have a lucrative position with the man who benefits from my client's downfall." Sophie met his eyes steadily. "I work for Mr. Calloway because I'm qualified for the position. I have advanced degrees in linguistics and legal translation. The only reason I was working as a waitress was because my father's false corruption charges made it impossible to get work in my field. Your client destroyed my career before I ever met him." "Allegedly false charges?" "No. Actually false charges, as the evidence in this trial has proven." Sophie didn't let herself get rattled. "My father was innocent. Your client had him murdered to cover up a fraud operation. Those are facts, not allegations." Ashford tried several more angles, but Sophie had lived with this truth for too long to be shaken from it. When she stepped down from the stand, she caught Ethan's eye. He gave her a small nod. She'd done okay. The defense put up experts who questioned the financial evidence, character witnesses who spoke about Sterling's philanthropy and business acumen. Even a forensic accountant who suggested the payments to Mansour could have been for legitimate legal services. But they couldn't explain away Omar's testimony, couldn't explain why Webb had received $500,000 right after Ahmad's death, couldn't explain the pattern of payments and cover-ups that Maya had documented so meticulously. Closing arguments happened on a Wednesday. The prosecution went first, Chen standing before the jury with quiet authority. "This case is about power," she said. "The power of wealthy men who believe they're above consequences. Damian Sterling didn't kill Ahmad Bennett with his own hands. He didn't need to. He had money, connections, and a network of people willing to do terrible things for the right price. He paid to have a good man murdered. He paid to cover it up. And he would have gotten away with it if Sophie Bennett hadn't had the courage to speak up." Chen paused, letting that sink in. "The defense wants you to believe this is a complicated case. It's not. A man discovered evidence of fraud. That evidence threatened a lucrative operation. So the people running that operation had him killed and made it look like an accident. Everything else, the financial records, the testimonies, the cover-up, is just proof of what we already know. Powerful men thought they could commit murder and walk away. Don't let them. Ashford's closing was smooth and polished, full of reasonable doubt and questions about evidence chains and witness credibility. He painted Sterling as a victim of circumstance, a successful man targeted by people with agendas. But Sophie watched the jury, and she could see they weren't buying it. The jury deliberated for 3 days. 3 days of waiting in a conference room near the courthouse, drinking bad coffee and trying not to go insane from the uncertainty. Emma came to visit during the second day, Ethan's sister Sarah bringing her by with cookies she'd decorated herself. "These are for good luck," Emma announced, presenting a cookie shaped vaguely like a star. "I made them thinking happy thoughts." "Then they're definitely lucky," Sophie said, accepting the cookie like it was precious. Emma hugged her tight. "When the jury says Daddy's friend is guilty, can we go get ice cream to celebrate?" "If they say he's guilty," Sophie corrected gently, "we don't know what they'll decide." "They'll say guilty, because he is guilty and juries are supposed to tell the truth." Emma's confidence was absolute. That's how it works. Sophie wished she had a 7-year-old's faith in the system. The call came on the third day, late afternoon. The jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom was even more packed than before, people standing in the back because all the seats were taken. Sophie sat between Ethan and Chen, her heart trying to escape her chest. Sterling walked in looking pale but composed. Mansour looked like he might be sick. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor." The forewoman stood, a middle-aged black woman who'd taken notes throughout the entire trial. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, how do you find the defendant Damian Sterling?" "Guilty." The courtroom erupted. Sophie couldn't hear the rest over the noise. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy, fraud, obstruction, money laundering, everything. Sterling's face went blank. Mansour actually did get sick, his lawyer frantically calling for a recess. Chen squeezed Sophie's hand. "We got them, all of them." Sophie couldn't speak, could barely breathe. 4 years of grief and rage and helplessness, and suddenly it was over. Justice wasn't impossible. It was just hard. Ethan's arm came around her shoulders, steady and warm. "Your father would be proud." That's when Sophie finally let herself cry. Not quiet tears, but full-body sobs that shook her entire frame. 4 years of held-back grief pouring out all at once. The media frenzy after the verdict was intense but brief. The story had a satisfying ending. Bad guys punished, good guys vindicated, justice served. Within 2 weeks, the news cycle moved on to other scandals, other trials. Sophie was fine with that. She'd never wanted to be famous. She'd just wanted the truth. Sentencing happened a month later. Sterling got 45 years without possibility of parole. Mansour got 35. Webb got his 20 as agreed. By the time any of them were eligible for release, they'd be old men who'd lost everything. Sophie attended the sentencing but didn't speak. She'd said everything she needed to say already. What surprised her was what came after. The Dubai legal authorities formally exonerated Ahmad Bennett of all corruption charges. An official statement was issued apologizing for the miscarriage of justice. His name was cleared, his reputation restored. The law firm that had employed him, the one that had abandoned him after the charges, reached out with an apology and an offer of a settlement for wrongful termination. Sophie's lawyer, courtesy of Ethan, negotiated a sum that made her financially stable for the first time in her adult life. "You could retire," Maya pointed out when Sophie told her the amount. "Buy a house somewhere quiet, never work again." "And do what? Garden?" Sophie shook her head. "I like working. I like what I do." "You could do it somewhere other than New York." "I could, but I don't want to." Because New York was where Emma's school was, where Ethan's business was, where Sophie had finally found something that felt like home. She bought a small apartment in Brooklyn, not a penthouse, but a real place with her name on the deed. She decorated it with photos of her father, books in Arabic and English, artwork Emma had made her. It was hers in a way nothing had been hers since she'd left Dubai. But most nights, she still ended up at Ethan's place, having dinner with him and Emma, helping with homework, watching movies on the couch while Emma fell asleep between them.
You know people are going to talk, Ethan said one evening after Emma was in bed. About us. Working together, living in the same building, raising Emma together. Let them talk. Sophie was reading a contract proposal, her Arabic-English dictionary open beside her. I stopped caring what people think around the time someone shot at me. Fair point. Ethan was quiet for a moment. But I do want to know what this is, for my own clarity if nothing else. Sophie set down the contract and looked at him. What do you want it to be? That's not an answer. No, it's a question. Because I don't know what you want, Ethan. You're brilliant and rich and you could have anyone. Why would you want a former waitress with trust issues and nightmares? Because you're brilliant and brave and you see through bullshit most people accept as truth. Because Emma adores you. Because you make me want to be better than adequate. Ethan met her eyes, and because somewhere between the forgery and the shootout and the trial, I fell in love with you. Which wasn't part of the plan, but here we are. Sophie's breath caught. Here we are. Is that all you're going to say? I'm thinking. Sophie's mind was racing. You barely know me. I know you risked everything for a principal. I know you're kind to my daughter. I know you laugh at my terrible jokes and you don't let me get away with being emotionally unavailable. Ethan smiled slightly. That's enough to build on, I think. I have nightmares. I wake up at 3 a.m. convinced someone's trying to kill me. I wake up at 3 a.m. worrying I'm failing Emma. We can be insomniacs together. I don't know how to be in a relationship. I've been alone for 4 years. I've been alone for 5. We'll figure it out together. Ethan reached across the couch, taking her hand. Unless you don't want to. In which case, we stay friends and colleagues and co-parents to Emma, and that's okay too. I just needed you to know where I stand. Sophie looked at their joined hands, calloused from different kinds of work. Hers from years of restaurant labor, his from computer keyboards and stress. I'm scared, she admitted, of letting someone matter this much, of losing someone else I love. Yeah, me too. Ethan's grip tightened slightly. But I've learned something being Emma's dad. Being scared of loss doesn't protect you from it. It just makes you miss the good parts while you're too busy worrying about the end. He was right. Sophie had spent 4 years protecting herself from more pain by refusing to let anyone get close. And all it had done was make her lonely. Okay, she said quietly. Let's figure it out together. Ethan smiled, not his careful business smile, but something genuine and warm. Yeah? Yeah. He kissed her then, soft and tentative, like he was afraid she'd change her mind. Sophie kissed him back, letting herself fall into it, into him, into the terrifying possibility that maybe she deserved happiness after all. When they pulled apart, Emma was standing in the hallway in her pajamas, grinning like she'd won the lottery. I knew it, she announced. Aunt Sarah owes me $5. I said you'd kiss before Christmas, and she said after New Year's. You bet on us? Ethan asked, trying to sound stern and failing completely. Aunt Sarah started it. I just took the good side. Emma climbed onto the couch between them. Does this mean Sophie's staying forever? Sophie looked at Ethan, who looked back at her with a question in his eyes. Yeah, Sophie said, surprised by how certain she felt. I think it does. Emma hugged them both, her small arms barely reaching around. Good, because you make Daddy smile real smiles instead of work smiles, and you understand about dolphins. Those are excellent reasons, Sophie agreed. 6 months later, the UAE government issued a formal posthumous honor recognizing Ahmad Bennett's contributions to legal integrity and international justice. Sophie flew to Dubai to accept it, Ethan and Emma coming with her. Standing in her father's former office, now occupied by someone else but still containing the same view of the city he'd loved, Sophie felt the final piece of her grief settle into place, not disappearing, but transforming into something she could carry without it crushing her. He would have liked you, she told Ethan quietly, while Emma explored the building with a guide. My father. He would have liked that you care about the truth more than being comfortable. I would have liked to meet him. Yeah, me too. Sophie touched the desk where her father had worked. He taught me that staying silent is sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do, that speaking up, even when you're terrified, even when it costs you everything, that's what separates people who deserve respect from people who just demand it. Sounds like a wise man. He was. And he paid for it. Sophie turned to face Ethan. But he was right. Silence would have protected me, would have kept me safe and small and invisible, but I would have hated myself. Every day for the rest of my life, I would have known I let his murderers walk free because I was too scared to speak up. You spoke up. I did. And it was terrifying, and it almost got me killed, and it definitely destroyed my nice, quiet life. Sophie smiled. But I'd do it again. Every time. Because some things matter more than safety. Emma ran back in, chattering about the architecture and asking if they could go see the old souks. Sophie took her hand, Ethan took the other, and they walked out of Ahmad Bennett's former office together. The truth had cost Sophie 4 years of grief and nearly her life, but it had also given her back her father's honor, given her a career that mattered, given her a family she hadn't known she needed. Some prices were worth paying. On the flight home, Emma fell asleep against Sophie's shoulder, her small body warm and trusting. Ethan worked on his laptop, occasionally glancing over with that soft expression he got when he looked at the people he loved. Sophie thought about the waitress she'd been a year ago. Invisible, silent, convinced that justice was something that happened to other people. That woman felt like a stranger now. She'd learned something important through all of this, something her father had tried to teach her, but she'd been too young to understand. The world didn't naturally bend toward justice. It bent toward whoever had the most power, the most money, the loudest voice. Justice required people willing to risk everything to pull it back toward truth, required courage and stubbornness, and the absolute refusal to accept that some people were above consequences. Ahmad Bennett had been that kind of person. And in speaking up that night at the Velvet Room, Sophie had discovered she was too. She wouldn't have chosen this path, wouldn't have chosen her father's murder or the years of grief or the terror of being shot at or the ordeal of the trial. But she wouldn't undo it either, because on the other side of all that pain was a life that actually meant something. Was Emma's hand in hers and Ethan's quiet strength and work that honored her father's memory? Was the knowledge that when it mattered most, when staying silent would have been easier and safer, Sophie Bennett had found her voice and used it. That was enough. That was more than enough. It was everything.